Chapter 3054. All along, Xianyuan Ling had been trying to control the situation within a controllable range. However, Ancestor Haze people were getting more and more lawless. Now, even an ancient creature powerhouse had appeared. This was a powerhouse on the same level as Xianyuan Ling. Such a development undoubtedly infuriated Xianyuan Ling. Since Ancestor Haze people kept escalating the situation, Xianyuan Ling could only use his strength to wake them up. Long Qing hadn't made a move since the beginning of the battle between the two factions. It wasn't that she didn't want to. With Long Qing's temper, she had long wanted to teach Ancestor Haze people a lesson, but she was stopped by Xianyuan Ling. And now, Xianyuan Ling took the initiative to ask Long Qing to make a move, which undoubtedly showed his attitude. Long Qing, who was drinking wine in the courtyard with nothing to do, suddenly received a message from Xianyuan Ling. The corner of her mouth revealed a faint smile. These guys are really courting death. Even Big Brother, who has a good temper, is completely enraged. How could Long Qing not hear the anger in Xianyuan Ling's heart from his words just now? Moreover, Xianyuan Ling had specially instructed her to do whatever she wanted. Didn't that mean that she could be unscrupulous? With his personality, Xianyuan Ling should understand what this sentence meant. Even her good-natured big brother was forced into a corner. One could imagine how overboard Ancestor Haze actions were. No problem. Without thinking much, Long Qing directly replied to Xianyuan Ling. Then, she moved and disappeared on the spot. Brother Xianyuan, what are you? On the other side, Xianyuan Ling, who received Long Qing's reply, still had an ugly expression. Li Tian, who was beside him, also revealed a bitter smile. In response, Xianyuan Ling only said one sentence indifferently. Some people don't know how to restrain themselves if you don't beat them up. They always think that they can be unscrupulous. Since you don't believe in the soft way, then use the hard way. If you don't want to solve it through the soft way, then use the hard way. Upon hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, Li Tian shook his head with a bitter smile and didn't say anything more. Xianyuan Ling was completely enraged. As for the battlefield, with the appearance of Ling Guan, the situation changed instantly. Even Song Xing, Nangong Guan, and the others had dignified expressions when facing Ling Guan. This was an ancient creature with a very high status. Even in Sacred Hall, no one had expected his appearance. You guys can leave. This spirit vein belongs to the Heaven Enlightenment sect. As soon as he said this, Song Xing and Nangong Guan's expressions became even more unsightly. To put it bluntly, the battle over the spirit veins was only on the surface. The real battle was between Xiao Chen's faction and Ancestor Haze faction. Now, Ling Guan had asked them to give up the spiritual vein. If they really did give it up, how would Xiao Chen's faction still have any face left? This was a blatant slap to the face. Ling Guan's sudden appearance was probably premeditated for a long time. He had long since planned to use the ancient era's creatures to suppress Xiao Chen's people, making the outside world mistakenly think that Ancestor Haze people had the advantage. Were these guys so keen on suppressing Xiao Chen's faction? They looked coldly at Ling Guan. In response, Ling Guan's expression was indifferent. 3 seconds. If you don't leave, you'll die. Ling Guan said coldly, as if he didn't want to waste time talking nonsense with them. Hearing this, Song Xing and Nangong Guan were furious, but there was nothing they could do. With their current strength, they weren't strong enough to contend against Ling Guan. If they continued to fight, it was hard to say whether Ling Guan would dare to kill them, but they would definitely lose face. Ling Guan's strength alone was enough to make them powerless. This was the might of an ancient era's creature. In addition, Xianyuan Ling's faction's attitude was unclear. They had always been patient. This time, Ling Guan suddenly made a move. They didn't know what Xianyuan Ling's attitude was, so Song Xing and Nangong Guan didn't dare to be too impulsive. They didn't want to ruin Xianyuan Ling's plans. Just like this, Song Xing and Nangong Guan had already decided to retreat. It wasn't because they were afraid, but because they had too many things to consider. But right at this moment, a terrifying aura descended from the sky. This aura wasn't any weaker than Lingguan's. In fact, it was even stronger. Lingguan, how long has it been since we last met? You've really made people have a whole new level of respect for you. It was another ancient era's creature. Everyone present, whether it was the experts from Star Sect, Heavenly Enlightenment Sect, or the experts from other sects, felt the aura. Their gazes all narrowed. Something bad was about to happen. It was supposed to be a normal fight for resources, but who would have thought that an ancient era's creature would be drawn out? Moreover, it wasn't just one ancient era's creature. From the looks of it, the newly descended ancient era's creature should be someone from Xiao Chen's faction. Both factions had ancient era's creatures descend. This matter instantly rose to a whole new level. While everyone was nervous, they were also secretly excited. They all wanted to see how this matter would end. They wanted to see who would emerge victorious in the competition between the two factions. They still didn't know which ancient era's creature had descended. But when Song Xing and Nangong Guan sensed the aura, they instantly reacted. Then, the two of them looked at each other. They could see a complicated look in each other's eyes. It was naturally a good thing that someone had come to support them. But the person who had come was somewhat unexpected. If Xianyuan Ling had come personally, Song Xing and Nangong Guan would have been relieved. But the person who had come was Long Qing. So, it was hard to say. Sure enough, as soon as he finished speaking, Long Qing's figure appeared on the battlefield. Seeing Long Qing's expression changed. Even Ling Guan's face darkened. A hint of fear flashed in his eyes. That's right. His appearance had been planned long ago. On one hand, he wanted to ruthlessly suppress Xiao Chen's faction. On the other hand, he wanted to test their bottom line. He wanted to see how Xiao Chen's faction would react to his appearance. Would they still use the gentler method from before to deal with this matter? But it was clear that Xianyuan Ling's choice wasn't what Ling Guan and the others thought. He had directly eliminated Long Qing. This was enough to explain everything. When it came to the conflict between the two factions, Long Qing was an absolute hardliner. His attitude was much tougher than Xianyuan Ling's. Taking a deep breath, before Ling Guan could speak, Long Qing spoke first. What, can't you speak? Weren't you talking a lot just now? Humph, Long Qing, could it be that you think I'm afraid of you? Aren't you? We're both ancient era's creatures. Don't go too far. As soon as Long Qing appeared, his attitude towards Ling Guan was full of contempt. This made Ling Guan very uncomfortable, and the anger in his heart continued to rise. They were both ancient era's creatures, but Long Qing didn't treat Ling Guan as an existence of the same level. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 3055. It was supposed to be an ordinary fight for resources, but now it had attracted two ancient creatures. The situation, which had been relatively restrained before, had escalated completely in an instant. This was because both Long Qing and Ling Guan were second only to the divine ancestor in their respective factions. They were the absolute core figures. Their attitudes, on a certain level, could already represent the attitudes of their respective factions. Compared to the battle below, Long Qing and Ling Guan had personally taken part in it. The significance was obviously different. In addition, Long Qing was completely different from Xianyuan Ling. She did not care about the overall situation. As long as someone made her unhappy, she would beat them up. Long Qing looked at Ling Guan with disdain. Especially after hearing what Ling Guan said, the disdain on his face grew even denser. He even revealed a mocking smile. Both ancient creatures? Hey, you're really shameless. Don't tell me you don't have any idea how you got your cultivation? Although they were in the same cultivation realm, Ling Guan and Long Qing could not be compared at all. One was an ancient creature who relied on himself to break through, while Ling Guan was forcibly promoted by Ancestor He using heaven-defying means. This was a fundamental difference. Even though on the surface there was not much difference between the two of them in terms of cultivation, but in terms of actual combat strength, there was a huge difference. To put it bluntly, in Long Qing's eyes, Ling Guan was only a pseudo-ancient creature. She did not care about him at all. Ling Guan was flustered and exasperated. Before he could speak, Long Qing interrupted him and waved her hand casually as if she was shooing a fly away. "All right, I don't want to listen to your nonsense. Same thing, scram. If you don't scram in 3 breaths, you'll die here." She was completely contemptuous. It was as if they were not on the same level. Seeing Long Qing's attitude, the people of the surrounding factions were stunned. Some people who did not know Long Qing's identity asked curiously, "Who is this lady? Is she so arrogant? You don't even know her?" This is Xiao Chen's sworn second sister. It is said that she is extremely famous in the temple and is one of the few experts. But that Lord Ling Guan is also an ancient era's living being. Yet, he doesn't seem to be taken seriously at all. In terms of status, Lord Chongqing is definitely higher. But in terms of strength, it's hard to say. After all, we haven't seen it with our own eyes. Everyone discussed the Dao via voice transmission. It was obvious that Long Qing's prestige was higher than Ling Guan's even in the entire mortal realm. Especially in the eyes of the world lords who had participated in the primordial world war, Chongqing's status was definitely higher than Ling Guan's. After all, Long Qing had a solid battle record, while Ling Guan basically didn't have any battle record to show on the battlefield. Don't blame me for not reminding you. My temper is different from my big brother's. It's best if you don't leave in 3 breaths or you will really die. 1. Long Qing didn't pay attention to the whispers of the people around him. He had already started counting down. Hearing Long Qing's words, Ling Guan knew that he wasn't Long Qing's match. The gap between the two of them was huge. However, he was extremely unwilling to retreat just like that. There was no other reason. If he retreated in front of so many people, Ancestor He's faction would be completely disgraced. 2. He was still indifferent. Ling Guan did have a glimmer of hope. He still thought that Long Qing wouldn't dare to do anything to him. After all, he was an ancient era's living being. It didn't matter what method he used to become so. It was the truth. As an ancient era's living being, he was a true core figure in the temple. He didn't believe that Long Qing would dare to kill him. Therefore, even though he heard Long Qing's continuous countdown, Ling Guan still didn't choose to retreat. He felt that Long Qing would consider the other people in the temple and wouldn't kill him just like that. However, Ling Guan obviously didn't realize that Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling had completely different personalities. Perhaps it was because of Xianyuan Ling's previous actions that Ling Guan and the rest had an illusion. That was, Xiao Chen's people were all people who cared about the big picture. However, Long Qing was definitely not such a person. If you wanted Long Qing to care about the big picture, you were thinking too much. In other words, Long Qing had already considered the big picture when he gave Ling Guan a chance to leave. Otherwise, Ling Guan wouldn't even have the chance to leave. Since he had already given Ling Guan a chance, and made it clear that Ling Guan didn't want to leave, Long Qing had nothing to say given his personality. "I'll just kill you." 3. As the last word fell, a terrifying aura exploded from Long Qing's body. At the same time, accompanied by a dragon's roar, the voice of a green dragon appeared behind Long Qing. "Since you don't want to leave, then die." With that, Long Qing took the initiative to attack. With a slap, a huge dragon claw grabbed at Ling Guan across the air. Seeing that, Ling Guan frowned. He didn't expect Long Qing to really attack. However, he didn't have time to think. Immediately, Ling Guan blocked the attack with a punch and hit the dragon claw hard. He wanted to use that to counter Long Qing's attack. However, he obviously thought too much. When his attack landed on the dragon claw, it didn't break the dragon claw at all. It only made Long Qing's attack pause for a moment. Then, the fist print dissipated and the dragon claw continued to grab at Ling Guan. Ling Guan's eyes were filled with fear. Is there such a huge difference in power? Ling Guan had never fought with Long Qing before. He thought that even if his power wasn't as strong as Long Qing, a real ancient living being, there shouldn't be much of a difference. There was no hope for him to win. However, it shouldn't be a problem for him to contend with Long Qing. That was why he was so confident. However, from the looks of it, with just one hit, the difference between the two of them was obvious. The difference wasn't small. It was huge. Long Qing's attack and his attack weren't on the same level at all. His punch with all his strength didn't have any effect at all. Faced with such an outcome, Ling Guan had mixed feelings. However, seeing the dragon claw grabbing at him, Ling Guan wouldn't give up without a fight. Instead, he flashed and moved his feet, quickly dodging the attack. He didn't dare to go head-to-head with Long Qing. However, did he think he could dodge it so easily? Long Qing sneered. Green Dragon Seal. With that, the space above the sky was torn apart instantly. Another dragon claw fell from the sky. Unlike the previous dragon claw, this dragon claw was lifelike. Even the dragon scales could be seen clearly. Moreover, it fell from the sky like a mountain and blocked Ling Guan's escape route. He wanted to suppress Ling Guan with one hit and not give him any chance to retaliate. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Still looking for Sword Master Vast Expanse for free? Baidu directly searched. Very simple. Chapter 3056. A huge dragon claw descended from the sky like an ancient dragon, bringing with it a strong aura. Seeing that, Ling Guan's face turned gloomy. He formed a seal with both hands and a shadow of a giant appeared behind him. It was his strongest move. Facing Long Qing's attack, Ling Guan felt a strong sense of danger. He did not dare to hold back and attacked with all his might. The giant appeared and threw out a punch, colliding with the dragon claw. However, the attack landed. One of the arm of the shadow of the giant was torn apart by the dragon claw. Ling Guan's face turned pale, but he did not surrender. He threw out another punch. After 2 consecutive punches, he managed to block Long Qing's attack. Although he managed to block it, in everyone's eyes, the difference in strength between the two was obvious. One should know that the previous attack was just a casual attack from Long Qing, while Ling Guan had already attacked with all his might. Moreover, it took 2 attacks to block it successfully. It could be seen that the difference in strength between the two was huge. Even the people from the various major forces could tell that the two of them were not on the same level at all. They are both ancient creatures, but the difference in fighting strength is so huge. The higher one's cultivation level is, the greater the gap between them. The slightest difference can lead to a huge loss. This is what I mean. That's right. Moreover, didn't Lord Long Qing say that Ling Guan is at most a pseudo-ancient creature? He can't be compared to him at all. The battle had just begun, but everyone could already see the outcome. Judging from the current situation, Ling Guan could not possibly be Long Qing's opponent. That's right. However, how many times can you block it? With a calm voice, Long Qing attacked again. Seeing that, Ling Guan's face turned gloomy and he no longer had the calmness from before. After exchanging blows with Long Qing, Ling Guan realized the difference in strength between him and her. It was not a small difference, but an insurmountable gap. Ling Guan was already powerless to defend against the too simple attack. He could only block it with all his might. Seeing another dragon claw descending from the sky, Ling Guan could be said to be in a difficult position. It was impossible to dodge the attack. However, even Ling Guan couldn't unleash such a technique without a limit. Every time he used it, Ling Guan would expend a lot of energy. However, if he didn't do so, he wouldn't be able to block Long Qing's attack. If this continued, he would be exhausted to death even if he had to. Frowning, Ling Guan had no choice but to make another move. It was also at this moment that a figure suddenly appeared beside Ling Guan. It was another ancient life form from Ancestor Hei's side. Another ancient life form had descended, and the expressions of everyone present had become extremely interesting. Things seemed to be getting out of control. Ancestor Hei's lineage only had 2 ancient life forms in total, and both of them had been forcefully raised through secret techniques by Ancestor Hei. At this time, the 2 of them joined forces and successfully blocked Long Qing's attack. Seeing this, Long Qing wasn't surprised. After the new ancient life form blocked the attack, he turned to look at Long Qing and said with an ugly expression, "Long Qing, why don't we stop here? We're all from the Sacred Hall, don't let the outsiders see us as a joke." There didn't seem to be any problem with what he said, but everyone knew that he only said that because he was afraid of Long Qing. Even though there were 2 of them, it was still difficult for them to gain any advantage when facing Long Qing. In response, Long Qing sneered. "Let it go? He Feng, who do you think you are? You came out to show off your skills and say a few words, and you think you can let it go?" Even though he was facing He Feng, Long Qing still didn't give him any face. Hearing this, He Feng's face turned ugly. He really didn't expect Xianyuan Ling to send Long Qing out, and the development of the situation was also beyond He Feng's expectations. Originally, he just wanted to suppress Xiao Chen's faction, but who would have thought that Long Qing would come out? Now, even if he wanted to retreat, he couldn't. Looking at Long Qing, it was obvious that he wouldn't give up so easily. Long Qing, continuing to fight won't do anyone any good. Think carefully. "Ha, I've already thought it through. Just the 2 of you, what do you think you can do?" Even though it was 1 against 2, Long Qing didn't care about He Feng and Ling Guan at all. His hands formed a seal, and the space behind him tore open, and a huge dragon head slowly emerged. The dragon opened its mouth, and a terrifying aura instantly spread in all directions. "Dragon's breath." He called out softly, and then a terrifying yellow light shot out towards He Feng and Ling Guan. This was no longer Long Qing's casual attack, and he was serious. He Feng and Ling Guan's faces turned gloomy as they watched Long Qing attack again without saying a word. Especially He Feng, who rushed over because he knew that Ling Guan wasn't Long Qing's match after seeing that Ling Guan was at a disadvantage. He thought that Long Qing would be more restrained with his appearance, but who knew that she didn't give him any face at all. Even though it was 1 against 2, he didn't back down at all. On the contrary, he was so overbearing, and he attacked without saying anything. Facing the dragon's breath attack, the terrifying pressure made He Feng and Ling Guan's hearts skip a beat. This attack had already made the 2 of them feel the threat of death. This attack had the ability to kill the 2 of them. Without much time to hesitate, He Feng and Ling Guan attacked with all their might, and they both took out their trump cards. The 3 of them fought, but the final result left everyone extremely shocked. Even though he was facing 2 ancient living beings at the same time, Long Qing was definitely going to achieve an overwhelming victory after his attack landed. Even if He Feng and Ling Guan joined forces, they still couldn't block Long Qing's attack. In an instant, their resistance was destroyed by the dragon's breath, and they were directly hit by the dragon's breath and blasted away. They crashed into the mountain range in the distance, and in an instant, smoke and dust filled the air, and the mountain range collapsed. Such an outcome left the spectators in disbelief. Was there really such a huge gap? It was fine if it was 1 against 1, but now it was 2 against 1. But even so, He Feng and Ling Guan still couldn't withstand a single attack from Long Qing and were directly wiped out. This was absolutely a complete suppression. She was still so invincible even though she was fighting 2 against 1. These people obviously didn't know the difference between ancient creatures. With Long Qing's strength, Not to mention pseudo-ancient creatures like He Feng and Ling Guan, she was even comparable to the beast slaves and Shi Song. She wasn't weak at all. The smoke and dust gradually dispersed, and Ling Guan and He Feng's figures gradually revealed themselves. At this moment, both of them were extremely miserable. Not only were their bodies full of wounds, but they also spat out mouthfuls of blood. It was obvious that their injuries weren't light. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3057. They were both ancient living creatures, but even if the two of them joined forces, they still wouldn't be able to defeat Ling Qing. He Feng and Ling Guan were both heavily injured by Long Qing's dragon breath, but they couldn't even withstand a single blow from Long Qing. In the collapsed mountain range, the two of them kept coughing out blood while Long Qing stood calmly in the sky. In the face of Long Qing's silent gaze, a wisp of seriousness and fear flashed across their eyes. Thinking about it, they were too naive. Although they had always admitted that Ancestor Hei's side was inferior to Xiao Chen's side, looking at it now, the gap wasn't small at all. The gap was so huge that it made them feel hopeless. "Do you still want to continue?" Just then, Long Qing spoke coldly. No matter if it was He Feng or Ling Guan, the two of them chose to remain silent. Dragging their heavily injured bodies, they slowly rose into the air and came before Long Qing again. They were on guard as if they were facing a great enemy, but they had no intention of replying. What a joke! With just one attack, the two of them didn't dare to fight Long Qing at all. If they continued to fight, the two of them had no doubt that Long Qing definitely had the ability to kill them. Seeing that the two of them were silent and solemn, Long Qing's lips curled into a disdainful smile. Scared already? What a disappointment. Since you don't dare to fight anymore, let's talk about compensation. Compensation? Facing that, He Feng and Ling Guan's faces grew solemn. They were injured and defeated by Long Qing in one move in front of so many people. They had completely embarrassed themselves. Now, they actually wanted compensation? This was simply too much. However, what could they do if they were weaker? The two of them simply kept quiet. Tianqi sect, hand over all the spiritual veins and compensate Star sect. As for our matter, we'll talk about it when we return to the sacred hall. He didn't waste any time and directly stated his request. Facing that, not only He Feng and Ling Guan, but even the people from Tianqi sect at the side and many experts who were watching the battle had a drastic change of expression. Handing over all the spiritual veins in their hands, there was no need to explain what that meant. To a sect, spiritual veins were definitely the foundation of the sect. Without spiritual veins, how could the sect operate and how could the disciples cultivate? Long Qing's request undoubtedly wanted to completely destroy Tianqi sect. Just imagine, without spiritual veins, Tianqi sect would probably be annihilated in a short period of time. Impossible. It was a matter of the sect's survival. Tianqi sect's supreme elders couldn't care less about Long Qing's dignity and spoke directly. They absolutely could not agree to this condition. Otherwise, they might as well just destroy the Heaven Enlightening sect. However, Long Qing sneered in response to this. Your ins to speak? This was the result of choosing side. The Heavenly Enlightenment sect stood on Ancestor Hei's side. Now that Long Qing was suppressing He Feng and Ling Guan, someone had to pay the price. Ancestor Hei's faction naturally could not directly kill them. After all, they were also members of the temple. Estes Tianqi's, SSSTS, kill SSS. Therefore, the best way was to make an example out of Tianqi sect. It was Tianqi sect's. Now that the situation had turned out like this, Tianqi sect would definitely bear the brunt. If Xiao Chen's was defeated this time, Star sect would definitely suffer as well. Everyone understood that. Tianqi sect had obviously become Long Qing's. Faced with that, the supreme elders and headmaster of the celestial equal sect all had extremely unsightly expressions. Long Qing looked indifferently at He Feng and Ling Guan. How about it? If you don't agree, shall we continue? Continue? The two of them simply wanted to curse. How were they supposed to fight? They couldn't even take a single move from Tianqi's sex. How were they supposed to fight now? There was no way to fight at all. However, if they gave up on Tianqi's sect just like that, Tianqi's sex would be completely humiliated. Who would dare to listen to Tianqi's sex orders in the future? Just look at Tianqi's sect. No one would be willing to let such a thing happen to them. For a moment they were in a dilemma. Looking at He Feng and Ling Guan's silence, everyone from Tianqi's sect felt a chill run down their spines. What did their silence mean? It meant that they had no way to refute Long Qing. Although they did not agree, it was almost equivalent to tacitly agreeing. Our Tianqi sect is going to die just like that? A Tianqi sect's supreme elder muttered with a dull look in his eyes. On the other hand, Star's sect was incomparably excited. If they could obtain all the spirit veins in Tianqi sect's hands, Star's sect's strength would definitely be more than doubled. At that time, the sect would be able to nurture even more powerhouses. Looking at Long Qing's eyes, everyone from Star's sect was extremely excited, but at the same time, they were incomparably respectful. They all knew that all of this was brought to them by Long Qing. It was brought to them by Xiao Chen's s. They stood on the right side. If they had stood on Tianqi sect's side back then, perhaps the current Tianqi sect would be their Star sect. Some were happy, some were sad. The people from Tianqi sect were all ashen, while the people from Star sect were all extremely excited. He Feng and Ling Guan chose to remain silent. Long Qing could not be bothered to talk nonsense with them. He directly turned his head to look at Tianqi sect and said, "Finish the border exchange within 3 days. If not, I'll personally make a trip to Tianqi sect. Of course, if you think that Tianqi sect can protect you, you can try. However, when the time comes, it won't be so simple to end things. If Tianqi sect did this, they might be annihilated very quickly, but at least they could still protect the sect. At most, they would decline into a small force. However, if they did not do this, Long Qing would personally come. The outcome of Tianqi sect was obvious. Perhaps they would be directly destroyed. Everyone knew in their hearts what they should do. As soon as he said that, everyone fell into silence. No one expected things to develop to this point. However, at that moment, an even more terrifying pressure attacked. This pressure caused everyone's hearts to tremble. It was even more terrifying than when Long Qing appeared earlier. "You're here." Feeling the pressure, Long Qing sneered, while He Feng and Ling Guan were slightly stunned. Then, their eyes revealed a hint of ecstasy. Through the aura, the three of them already knew who it was. Soon, in the sky, a tall shadow slowly appeared, like a god descending to the world. Although it was not his original body, it made countless people's hearts palpitate. They could not help but worship him. "Long Qing, let's end this here. There's no need to be so aggressive." The huge shadow spoke slowly. It was like the voice of the heavenly Tao, making people involuntarily choose to submit. The person who came was none other than Ancestor He, one of the few great sacred ancestors of the sacred temple. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3058. It was merely a silhouette that descended and did not move at all. However, one could not help but kneel down and worship him. His words were law. The power of the saint ancestor was evident. Everyone around, including the many star sect powerhouses, was kneeling on the ground. Only Long Qing was still standing in the sky. However, Long Qing's situation was obviously not too good. Facing Ancestor He's pressure, Long Qing had actually been holding on bitterly. Her eyes were filled with coldness as she looked up at Ancestor He. "Stop just like that? Don't you think it's too funny? How dare you?" With Long Qing's personality, she naturally would not lower her head to Ancestor He. As soon as she said that, He Feng and Ling Guan, who were at the side, immediately shouted. Ancestor Hei's appearance instantly made the two of them confident. No matter how strong Long Qing was, could she be stronger than Ancestor Hei? Ancestor Hei did not have the slightest intention of getting angry facing Long Qing's cold shout. If it wasn't for Long Qing's request that was too harsh, Ancestor Hei probably wouldn't have shown himself, because once he did, it was very likely that Xiao Qin would be drawn out. By then, things would only be more troublesome. However, this time, Ancestor Hei definitely had to show himself. If Tianqi sect was allowed to decline like that and hand over all the spirit veins in their hands, who would dare to support Ancestor Hei's faction in the future? It was a matter of face. At the same time, it was also a way to tell the world that Ancestor Hei's faction would not abandon their followers. It was precisely because of that Ancestor Hei had no choice but to show himself. Long Qing, we're both from the Sacred Palace. There's no need for things to be like this. Let's stop now. In the future, I'll only restrain the people below. How about that? It was considered giving Long Qing a way out. Long Qing's eyes were filled with dissatisfaction. Previously, when Ling Guan appeared, he was so overbearing. Now that his skills were inferior, and even He Feng was defeated by Long Qing would definitely not agree to let the matter go with just a few words from this old man. You want me to stop? Sure, as long as you agree to my conditions just now. You don't know what's good for you. Long Qing was still stubbornly clinging onto the Tianqi sect. The Tianqi sect had to be the scapegoat today. Otherwise, there would be no end to this matter. Ancestor Hei's face darkened when he heard that. There were so many people around, and he had personally stepped forward, but Long Qing was not willing to back down at all. It was obvious that he did not take him, the divine ancestor, seriously. If he couldn't even deal with Long Qing, then Ancestor Hei's faction would be too ashamed to face anyone in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, a powerful pressure descended from the sky and attacked Long Qing fiercely. Being suppressed by this pressure, Long Qing's face darkened. He struggled to support his body and did not kneel before Ancestor Hei. However, how could Long Qing compete with Ancestor Hei? No matter what, Ancestor Hei was a divine ancestor. His strength far surpassed Long Qing's. Seeing Ancestor Hei taking action, the surrounding people prostrated themselves on the ground. This matter was getting out of hand. First, the ancient living beings from both sides fought a great battle. Now, even the divine ancestor had stepped forward personally. To the crowd, a figure like the divine ancestor was not someone they could meet casually. Many of the people present, except for the world lords who had followed the divine ancestor to battle, had never seen him before. Now that Ancestor Hei had appeared, the shock was unimaginable. The pressure grew stronger and stronger. Even Long Qing found it difficult to bear. His entire body could not help but tremble. Just as Long Qing was about to be unable to hold on any longer, his body suddenly lightened, and the originally terrifying pressure instantly dissipated. Ancestor Hei, you've gone overboard. An indifferent voice was heard. Then, Xiao Qian's figure appeared in the sky. Little brother. Seeing Xiao Qian, Long Qing's face was filled with joy. Xiao Qian also smiled at Long Qing. Then, he turned his head to look at Ancestor Hei with an extremely cold expression. Seeing Xiao Qian's appearance, Ancestor Hei's eyes revealed a hint of solemnity. What he was afraid of had happened. Originally, Ancestor Hei was not willing to step forward because he was afraid of attracting Xiao Qian. If that happened, things would be difficult. Others might not know, but as a divine ancestor, how could he not know? Although he and Xiao Qian were both divine ancestors, there was actually no comparison between them. Among the divine ancestors, Xiao Qian and Lin Yun's strength was unique. When they were baptized by the power of living beings, Xiao Qian and Lin Yun received the most power of living beings. Their strength was also the strongest. It was not difficult to see this from the previous battle with the primogenitors. For example, Ancestor He and the others could only deal with one primogenitor. However, Shao Chen and Lin Yun could fight two primogenitors by themselves. This was the difference in strength. Now that Shao Chen had personally appeared, one could imagine the pressure on Ancestor He. Shao Chen, we are all from the same faction. Let's end this matter here. In the beginning, Ancestor He was not convinced. However, later on, Ancestor He understood that he did not have the strength to compete with Shao Chen at all. If Shao Chen did not care about these things, Ancestor He's faction would not have been able to jump around for so long. Okay. Upon hearing Ancestor He's words, Shao Chen nodded without hesitation. Ancestor He was overjoyed when he heard this. Naturally, it was best that Shao Chen agreed. Otherwise, today's matter would be difficult to resolve. However, before Ancestor He could rejoice for too long, Shao Chen continued and looked directly at the people from the Tianqi sect. The Tianqi sect did not respect the sacred hall and should be punished. Shao Chen did not continue to target Ancestor He because they were all from the sacred hall. Hence, he did not want to kill them all. However, the Tianqi sect was different. Long Qing had already said that the Tianqi sect would pay the price. Therefore, the Tianqi sect was set to be the scapegoat. Shao Chen was even more direct. He wanted to destroy the Tianqi sect immediately. Ancestor He's expression changed when he heard this. Everyone present broke out in cold sweat. This divine ancestor Shao Chen was even more overbearing than Ancestor He. He wanted to destroy a large sect with a single sentence. It was obvious that he did not care about the Tianqi sect at all. As for not respecting the sacred hall, everyone knew that it was just an excuse. Words were law. If he said that you did not respect the sacred hall, then you did not respect it. As for whether it was true or not, no one cared. There was no need for any evidence. As long as he said that you were, then you were. The most frightened people were naturally the people from the Tianqi sect present. Their expressions were extremely ugly, and their eyes were filled with horror. The Grand Elders of the Heavenly Enlightenment sect looked at Ancestor He in a panic and pleaded. Ancestor He, please save us. Our Tianqi sect is loyal and devoted to the Sacred Hall. We have no intention of disrespecting the Sacred Hall. Ancestor He was the only one who could save them now. Moreover, their Tianqi sect had always been working for Ancestor He. If it were not for Ancestor He, how could the Tianqi sect have a conflict with the Star sect? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3059. Upon hearing Shao Chen's words, everyone from the Heavenly Enlightenment sect turned ashen. When a divine ancestor declared that he was going to annihilate a sect, no matter how powerful the sect was, the outcome would be the same. This was because the entire land of all beings was created by him. It couldn't be easier for him to decide your life and death with a single word. The several Grand Elders of the Heavenly Enlightenment sect turned to Ancestor He on the other side. Everyone knew that Ancestor He was the only one who could change everything now. If Ancestor He didn't take action, the Heavenly Enlightenment sect's fate would be sealed. Ancestor He, however, Ancestor He fell into silence and didn't respond to the Heavenly Enlightenment sect's cries for help. Upon seeing Ancestor He's reaction, the hearts of the Heavenly Enlightenment sect's people sank to the bottom. Upon seeing this, Long Qing and the others curled their lips into a faint smile. Silence meant giving up. This was Ancestor He admitting defeat to Shao Chen. How could Ancestor He not know that Shao Chen only attacked the Heavenly Enlightenment sect because he was also a member of the Sacred Hall? Otherwise, everyone present, including He Feng and Ling Guan, wouldn't be able to escape death. After all, they were the ones who attacked. If Shao Chen wanted to kill, would Ancestor He be able to stop him? If he completely infuriated Shao Chen, even he wouldn't be able to protect himself. After all, if Shao Chen could slay a primogenitor, he could naturally kill him too. Xiao Chen glanced at Patriarch He indifferently. Seeing that Patriarch He had lowered his eyes and was looking down, Xiao Chen did not say anything more. Waves of pressure fell from the sky. In an instant, it enveloped everyone from the Heavenly Enlightenment sect. Every single member of the Heavenly Enlightenment sect present was completely enveloped by this oppressive aura. Under the pressure of this pressure, the Heavenly Enlightenment sect's disciples and elders were forcefully crushed. Not even their corpses remained. Ancestor He, save us. We did it for Ancestor He. The few grand elders of the Heavenly Enlightenment sect continued to beg for mercy. However, before they could finish their words, they exploded into clouds of blood mist one by one. Even though he was the lord of a world, he still could not withstand a wisp of Xiao Chen's pressure. In less than 10 breaths of time, the tens of thousands of Tianqi sect's disciples and grand elders had all perished. Blood rained down from the sky, and the hearts of everyone present trembled in fear as they faced such a situation. Was this the might of the sacred ancestor? Even a world lord would not be able to withstand a single strand of pressure. After doing all this, Xiao Chen faintly looked in the direction of the Heavenly Enlightenment sect. The Tianqi sect was tens of thousands of miles away from here, but Xiao Chen seemed to be able to see through space. He looked at the Tianqi sect from afar and spoke faintly. Tianqi sect, slay. His voice was like rolling thunder as it spread in the direction of the Tianqi sect. Everywhere it passed, everyone heard this voice. In the various cities, countless cultivators, including ordinary people, lifted their heads to look at the sky. Their faces were filled with shock. Heavenly Enlightenment sect? Someone wants to exterminate the Heavenly Enlightenment sect? Who is it that dares to exterminate the Heavenly Enlightenment sect? Where did this voice come from? Not everyone knew what had happened to the Tianqi sect. Many people found it strange. How could a sect like the Tianqi sect be exterminated so easily? They did not know that it was the sacred ancestor who had taken action. Inside the Tianqi sect, it was still a scene of prosperity. After all, as one of the few powerful sects in the land of all beings, the Tianqi sect had hundreds of thousands of disciples. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was an overlord. Senior brother, are you planning to cultivate in the heavenly pool? That's right. I earned some merit points a few days ago. It's just enough for me to cultivate in the heavenly pool. Junior brother, do you want to do the same? Do you want to go together? Very well. Some disciples were preparing to start their day of cultivation as usual. The deacon elders of the sect were also performing their duties. However, just as everything was going on as usual, an indifferent voice suddenly came from the sky. Tianqi sect, slay. It was a simple sentence, but it was clearly transmitted to the ears of all the disciples and elders of the Tianqi sect. Immediately, hundreds of figures shot up into the sky from all over the Tianqi sect. These people were all experts of the Tianqi sect. They looked around with gloomy expressions and shouted coldly. Impudent! Who dares to utter such arrogant words? The Tianqi sect was the overlord of this land within millions of miles. No other force dared to compete with them. Not to mention the arrogant words of exterminating the Tianqi sect. This was simply a joke. Usually, when the disciples of the Tianqi sect went out, they were superior existences. When people from other forces saw them, they would either stay at a respectful distance or be respectful. No one dared to offend them. Who dares to utter such arrogant words? We must exterminate his entire sect. Such angry curses rang out from all over the Tianqi sect. All the disciples of the Tianqi sect glared at the sky. However, the curses in the Tianqi sect soon stopped abruptly. This was because sword chi seemed to have appeared out of thin air in the sky. These sword chi were like a violent wind that could destroy time. They instantly shrouded the entire Tianqi sect. Not good. Quickly activate the sect protection array. They immediately sensed that something was amiss and wanted to activate the sect protection array. However, the sect protection array that the Tianqi sect was so proud of couldn't even last for a breath of time before it was blasted apart. How is this possible? The elders of the Tianqi sect were in disbelief. However, regardless of whether they believed it or not, this was the truth. Without the sect protection array, the entire Tianqi sect instantly turned into a living hell. Sword qi penetrated the bodies of countless Tianqi sect disciples. Screams immediately sounded one after another. "Senior brother, save me! Elder, save me!" Before they died, these disciples desperately begged their companions for help. Unfortunately, they didn't receive any response. As long as one was in the Tianqi sect, no one could escape unscathed. Everyone was instantly pierced into a hornet's nest by the countless sword qi. Even the elders in the sky and the several terrifying auras that erupted from the depths of the Tianqi sect couldn't resist the sword qi at all. In the depths of the Tianqi sect, several supreme elders who had the cultivation of world lords were instantly killed. Before they died, they seemed to have guessed something and said unwillingly, Why did the Divine Ancestor attack our Tianqi sect? Only the Divine Ancestor could destroy the entire Tianqi sect without seeing anyone and even attacking from millions of miles away. However, when did the Tianqi sect offend the Divine Ancestor? From the beginning to the end, the Tianqi sect had been following Divine Ancestor He closely. Divine Ancestor He? I understand now. It's Divine Ancestor Shaoqun. It's him. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3060. They guessed that it was Shaoqun's saint ancestor, but even so, it was meaningless. Ancestor He, who had been following Tianqi sect, could not save them at all. He could only watch as Shaoqun destroyed Tianqi sect. This powerful sect that followed Ancestor He's faction was almost wiped out in an instant. The Celestial Mountain and Jade Tower where Tianqi sect was originally at disappeared from the world as if it had never appeared. At the same time, where Shaoqun and the others were, Shaoqun, who had done all this, still only glanced at Ancestor He indifferently. Without saying anything, his figure slowly disappeared. From the beginning to the end, Shaoqun did not say anything to warn Ancestor He. However, everyone already knew what he meant. Tianqi sect was a lesson. After Shaoqun left, Ancestor He said to Hefeng, Lingguan, and the others in Ancestor He's faction, "Return to the sacred palace." Then, his figure also slowly disappeared. After the two saint ancestors left one after another, the surrounding people could not help but heave a sigh of relief. There was nothing they could do. Shaoqun and Ancestor He gave them too much pressure. Moreover, no one expected things to end in such a way. The overlord Tianqi sect was destroyed just like that. Moreover, it was in front of Ancestor He. This made everyone see how domineering Shaoqun was. Without saying anything, Hefeng, Lingguan, and the others left dejectedly. Long Qing looked at the people from Star Sect and said indifferently, "Star Sect is blessed. We can take all the resources and properties of Tianqi sect." Although Tianqi sect was destroyed, the sect's spirit vein and many properties were still there. Long Qing did not think much and directly rewarded all of them to Star Sect. Hearing that, the Star Sect's experts were immediately excited. If they could obtain Tianqi sect's properties and spirit vein, Star Sect would definitely be able to reach a higher level. That was the difference. Tianqi sect that followed Ancestor He's faction was destroyed directly, while Star Sect that followed Shaoqun's faction gained many benefits because of this. There was no doubt that everyone could see that Shaoqun's faction was undoubtedly the victorious party in the infighting of the Holy Sanctum. After handing over the matter, Long Qing left very quickly, leaving only Tsang Xing and Nangong Guan to help Star Sect deal with the aftermath. After Long Qing left, many people dared to go forward to congratulate the Star Sect Master and the Supreme Elders. Those who were discerning eyes could tell that Star Sec's faction this time was really going to rise. Not only was it valued by Zhao's faction, they also obtained many substantial treasures. As for Tianqi's sect, it was not worth mentioning. Although no one dared to say anything bad about Ancestor Hei's faction from the beginning to the end, everyone knew very well that they probably wouldn't be able to serve Ancestor Hei's faction in the future. After all, they had been at his beck and call, yet in the end, they had ended up dead. Who wouldn't be bitterly disappointed when they saw this? Just this matter alone caused Ancestor Hei's faction's prestige to be greatly reduced in the hearts of the world. It would probably be difficult for them to rise again in the future. On the Sacred Palace's side, Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian were still together. Li Tian was the first to speak with a smile on his face. Looks like Ancestor Hei's faction will be well behaved for a while. He should have seen reality from the beginning. Xianyuan Ling replied with a smile. There was no need for Ancestor Hei's faction and Xiao Chen's faction to fight at all. Firstly, the strength of both sides was not equal. Secondly, there was not much conflict. As for the right to speak in the Sacred Palace, Xiao Chen did not care. As for Ancestor Hei, it was impossible for him to surpass Xiao Chen. This was something that came with strength. Without strength, one would naturally not be able to obtain it. Now that he had suffered such a huge loss, Ancestor Hei probably had to reflect on himself. Hearing that, Li Tian smiled. However, his expression soon became serious as he looked at Xianyuan Ling seriously. I already have some clues about the foreign race's powerhouses. During this period of time, Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian had been looking for information about the foreign race. When the primogenitors had fallen, they had said that the reason they created the new world was to protect this world. This was because in an unseen place, outside of this world, there were even more terrifying existences. Facing them, the power of the world was not enough to contend against them. Therefore, the primogenitors had created the new world to fight against the foreign race. However, regardless of whether it was Xiao Chen or Little Qing, they had never heard of this before. Xiao Chen naturally could not let his guard down. Therefore, he had asked Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian to look through many ancient books. These ancient books were all found from the primogenitors. Now they finally had some clues. Moreover, according to the records of these ancient books, the foreign race was indeed very powerful. Even if it was the origin world from all those years ago, it was a taboo, and the words spoken by the origin world were filled with dense solemnity. If such powerful foreign race really invaded, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yes, let's sort it out. It's necessary to discuss this matter with everyone. After a moment of silence, Xianyuan Ling nodded in agreement. Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian quickly threw Ancestor Hei's matter to the back of their minds. As for Ancestor Hei, he, who had suffered such a great loss, was currently sitting across from Mo He and Li Tian in his cave dwelling. Clearly, Mo He had taken the initiative to come to him. Seeing Ancestor Hei's extremely unsightly expression, Mo He sighed helplessly. I told you long ago that this would be the result. You just had to go and fight with them. Ever since Xiao Chen and Ancestor Hei's factions had begun to fight, Mo He had told Ancestor Hei more than once that it was meaningless. Moreover, how could Ancestor Hei's faction possibly win against Xiao Chen's faction? It was also because Xiao Chen had no intention of obtaining any power. Otherwise, such a battle would have ended as soon as it began. Ancestor Hei did not reply. Instead, he remained silent. Seeing this, Mo He continued. At our level, is there anything that we can't let go of? Are you willing to personally deal with the matters of the sacred temple? Rather than fighting over these things, it's better to enjoy the peace and quiet. Also, don't forget about the matter of the foreign race. I heard that Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian have already found some clues. The situation is not too optimistic. Mo He's words were sincere. At their level, authority was no longer important. Even without the sacred temple, they were still existences that stood at the peak of all living beings. So, why should they care about such flashy things? If they had the time, it would be better to think about how to increase their own strength. The martial path had no limit. Even after infiltrating the various divine ancestors, they were still pursuing the path of martial path. This was what the various divine ancestors were most willing to pursue, not power. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3061. Old Hay, with our current status, what can we not obtain? As long as there is something in this world, we only need to say a word, and there will be people willing to give it to us. Don't have such thoughts in the future. Power is not something we should be pursuing. Moreover, there is the foreign race before us. He said earnestly to Ancestor Hay. Ancestor Hay was silent for a long time. His expression changed several times before he finally calmed down and sighed. Sigh, how could I not know that? Forget it. I'll just treat this as a lesson. That's good. Hearing that, he nodded in relief. He had said so much because he was afraid Ancestor Hay would take this matter to heart. It would cause him to do something impulsive in the future. This time, Shao Chun had only destroyed the Heavenly Enlightenment sect to give Ancestor Hay a warning. As for Ancestor Hay's faction, he did not say a single word, nor did he mention any punishment. This could be considered to be leaving Ancestor Hay some face. However, if Ancestor Hay did not know the severity of the matter and continued to provoke him, then, next time, even he could guarantee that the matter would not be so easily brushed aside. At that time, not to mention Ancestor Hay's faction, even Ancestor Hay himself would not be able to protect himself. Regarding the battle between Ancestor Hay and Shao Chun, he had never doubted that the victor would be Shao Chun. However, it seemed that the result was good. Ancestor Hay was not someone who could not see the severity of the matter. Seeing he relax, Ancestor Hay asked, "Have you really investigated the matter of the foreign race? Although there aren't many records, there are at least some clues. Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian are planning to report this matter." Normally, the Sacred Hall was like this. The divine ancestors practically did not concern themselves with worldly affairs. All matters, big or small, were handled by their subordinate. No matter which faction they belonged to, only when they encountered something they could not handle would they report it to the divine ancestors. Furthermore, this wasn't something that could be reported to just one sacred ancestor. Every sacred ancestor had to be reported to the sacred ancestor. Just as he was speaking, a message from Li Tian flew into Ancestor Hay's forehead. It contained information about the foreign race. Seeing this, he smiled. Li Tian's actions were undoubtedly giving Ancestor Hay a way out. Otherwise, if Li Tian didn't even report this matter to Ancestor Hay, what would Ancestor Hay do then? Fortunately, Li Tian knew how to choose, and he knew that he had to consider the big picture. After receiving Li Tian's message, Ancestor Hay's expression became better. However, when he received the contents of the message, his expression quickly turned grave. He was not surprised by this. After all, this was also the case when he had first received the message. The matter of the outsiders is much more serious than we thought. Yeah, maybe it's even harder to deal with than the origin world. The alien tribes were harder to deal with than the ones in the original world. This fact made everybody shiver inwardly. While Ancestor Hay and he were talking about the foreign races, Shao Chun was also discussing this matter with Xianyuan Ling in the distant Yuan province, in a courtyard with beautiful scenery. It was the property of the Star sect. Shao Chun and Lin Yun sat by the lake in the courtyard. Xianyuan Ling's silhouette was saying something in front of them. Shao Chun said calmly after Xianyuan Ling finished speaking, "You've already been in contact with the foreign races since 500 years ago?" "That's right. According to the records in the origin world, The primogenitors have been in contact with the foreign races since 500 years ago. Both sides seem to have discussed it once. The foreign race's attitude was very clear. They wanted this world to submit to them. Otherwise, they would destroy it. How domineering! Do you know where the foreign races came from? Not only that, but there are very few records about the outside world. There's basically no mention of it in the ancient books. We only know that the extreme realm of the heavens and earth is the place that connects this world to the outside world. Xianyuan Ling did not know what kind of world it was because there were no records at all. Therefore, Xianyuan Ling could not answer Xiao Chen's question. Xiao Chen did not say much about it. He only asked another question. Do the others know about this? I've already sent a message to all the divine ancestors. All right. Xianyuan Ling nodded slightly, and his figure dissipated. Xiao Chen and Lin Yun smiled at each other and directly connected to the sacred hall with their divine consciousness. In the main hall of the sacred hall, mysterious ripples spread out. This was a sign that the divine ancestors had gathered for a meeting. Only the sacred ancestors were able to sense the fluctuations. Soon, Ancestor He, Mo He, Dongfang Yun, and Mu Lingxian, who had been summoned by Xiao Chen and Lin Yun, arrived in the hall. Of course, everyone had sent their divine consciousness. They did not come in person. After all, like Xiao Chen and Lin Yun, they were not all in the sacred hall. Right now, only Mo He and Ancestor He were still in the sacred hall. Mu Lingxian and Dongfang Yun, like Xiao Chen and Lin Yun, had gone out to travel the world. However, the two of them were alone, unlike Xiao Chen and the others who had traveled together. When everyone had arrived, Xiao Chen did not keep them in suspense and said bluntly, "Everyone already knows about the foreign race, right? We can't be careless about this matter. After all, the foreign race doesn't have a good impression of us. Moreover, they feel that we are enemies and not friends. Therefore, we have to carry out this matter." "You mean to make a trip to the extremities of heaven and earth?" The extremities of heaven and earth were known as the extremities of heaven and earth. Since this was the only place where heaven and earth were in contact with the outside world, everyone had to go. Everyone had to make a trip there, and the divine ancestor had to go in person. If they were to leave it to their subordinates, not to mention whether they could find the extremities of heaven and earth, even if they could, it would definitely be extremely time-consuming. Moreover, there were some things that they had to do in person. Perhaps they could even come into contact with the legendary foreign race? They understood what Xiao Chen meant, but who should they send next? Everyone looked at each other. In the end, after some discussion, they decided to send Xiao Chen and Lin Yun. This was because the two of them were the strongest. Moreover, no one knew what dangers there would be at the extremities of heaven and earth. That was a true forbidden area. Perhaps even the spirit of heaven and earth, Little Qing, had never been there before. Therefore, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun were the most suitable to go. Xiao Chen and Lin Yun could not refuse. Lin Yun could only tease them helplessly. "Looks like I really have a hard life. I've only rested for a short while, and I have to start running again? Haha, you are the one who is able to do more work. Who asked me to not be in the land of all living beings now? If I were here, I would go too." In response, Mu Lingxian smiled and teased. "Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 3062. Mu Lingxian had been wandering outside ever since the end of the war in the origin world. Moreover, he wasn't in the land of all living beings. Instead, he was scattered all over the world. No one knew where he was. According to him, he wanted to see the entire world. There were many places he hadn't been to before, so he wanted to visit them personally. Xiao Chen and Lin Yun rolled their eyes at him. This guy was obviously lazy. Otherwise, with his strength, he could have gone to the end of the world even if he was outside. However, it wasn't the time to shirk responsibility. This was a matter of great importance. They couldn't afford to be careless. Soon, they reached an agreement. Everyone's divine consciousness slowly dissipated. The hall regained its tranquility. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. In the Yuan province, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Qin Shuru, Lu Bingning, and the other girls also walked over. "What's wrong? I'm afraid we'll have to leave first." "Oh, right," Lin Yun said helplessly. Originally, they had planned to play in the Yuan province for a while, but now they definitely couldn't. Hearing this, the girls were a little speechless. However, there was nothing they could do. It wasn't easy for them to have such an opportunity to travel together, but now it was going to be ruined. "I knew it would be like this," Gu Lingyao said unhappily with a pout. Even though they were unwilling, they had no choice. After bidding farewell to the girls, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun quickly left. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun weren't worried about everyone's safety. In the land of all living beings, there were very few people who could threaten them. After all, Qin Shuru and the others had the cultivation of an ancient life form. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they could do whatever they wanted in the land of all living beings. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun left the land of all living beings very quickly. They didn't even use the spatial spirit boat. In a flash, they were tens of thousands of miles away. However, the extreme point of heaven and earth was very far away. According to the records of the ancestors, it was in the extreme north of heaven and earth. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun rushed all the way to the north. At such a speed, they soon passed through the region in his memory. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun had never been to this area before. Although they were still surrounded by the same starry sky and endless darkness, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun had never set foot here. Not only the two of them, but many others had probably never been to this place. This place was far beyond the center of the world. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this was a remote place with few people. But even so, this place was still very far away from the extreme heavens and the end of earth. Without stopping, he continued to head north. However, after several days of sex, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun suddenly discovered a continent in front of them. Here. There was actually a continent here, and it didn't seem to have been affected by the war at all. Although it wasn't big and the world energy wasn't too abundant, it wasn't damaged at all. The war that had swept across the entire world seemed to have nothing to do with this continent. After all, this place was too remote. The Origin World's army didn't affect this place. I wonder if there are any living beings on this continent. There should be. As the two spoke, they approached the continent. Because it was in front of them, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun didn't bother to take a detour. They planned to directly pass through this continent and continue moving forward. However, before the two of them could finish speaking, a dozen figures suddenly appeared in front of them and blocked their path. "Who are you?" The leader looked suspiciously at Xiao Chun and Lin Yun and shouted coldly. Perhaps because they had little contact with the outside world, these people were obviously very wary of Xiao Chun and Lin Yun. They weren't very strong. The strongest among them was only an Emperor Realm Master. This kind of cultivation wasn't worth mentioning in the eyes of Xiao Chun and Lin Yun. However, they were a little curious about the race of these people. They had never seen such a race. They had blue skin from head to toe, and there were fin-like membranes on their palms and feet. "We have something to do and are just passing by. We mean no harm. Where is this place?" "The Blue Water World." Hearing this, the leader replied. They were still worried about Xiao Chun and Lin Yun. Especially when they heard that the two were going to enter the Blue Water World, these people acted as if they were facing a great enemy. Even though Xiao Chun and Lin Yun had already said that they meant no harm, these people were still very wary. This made Xiao Chun and Lin Yun a little speechless. It was obvious that the beings of the Blue Water World were very xenophobic. Perhaps it was because they had never had contact with the outside world. "The two of us do have something to do. We don't have any improper thoughts about the blue water world. No, outsiders are not allowed to enter the blue water world. They refused without hesitation. Facing such stubborn people of the blue water world, Xiao Qin and Lin Yun were a little speechless. It seemed that they couldn't be reasoned with. Lin Yun took a step forward, and her pressure instantly enveloped the dozen or so people present. She didn't want to harm these people's lives. She only used her pressure to knock them out. The leader forcefully withstood Lin Yun's pressure and immediately crushed a token. It should be a signal for help. However, they only lasted for a few breaths of time before the leader directly slipped through. Lin Yun and Xiao Qin didn't care about this. After all, with their strength, there was nowhere in this world that they couldn't go. They weren't worried at all that the people of the blue water world would seek revenge on them. They directly passed by the few people and walked towards the blue water world. Soon, they entered the blue water world. As far as the eye could see, it was a vast ocean. It seemed like there wasn't even a piece of land. Strangely, in this endless ocean, there were towering ancient trees everywhere. It was unknown how big these trees were. However, since they could grow hundreds of meters out of the water, they definitely weren't small. Moreover, even Xiao Qin and Lin Yun had never seen these towering ancient trees before. This is quite interesting. Almost all of them are species that I've seen before. I've never heard of this blue water world before. It seems like it has never had any contact with the outside world and is independent. It should be. If it wasn't for the fact that time is tight, we would know the truth. It's fine. We can stay for a while on the way back. As they slowed down and hurried, they curiously discussed. Discovering such a world that wasn't recorded, Xiao Qin and Lin Yun were naturally curious. After all, no matter what, the blue water world was a part of the world. Just as the two of them were curiously chatting, hundreds of figures suddenly rushed out from under the water. They should be living beings of the blue water world. As soon as these people appeared, they shouted angrily. "Who are you? Why did you trespass into my blue water world? Why did you hurt my people? Please collect, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 3063. Evidently, these people had come to stop Xiao Qin and Lin Yun. Xiao Qin said helplessly, "We don't have any ill intentions. The two of us have no ill intentions. We just happened to pass by this place." "Humph, what nonsense. Piss off right now, or don't blame us for being merciless." The blue water world did not seem to have any patience or good feelings towards outsiders. It was like an independent world that did not have any contact with the outside world and did not care about the outside world. However, it was impossible for Xiao Qin and Lin Yun to piss off. Xiao Qin could only helplessly sigh. There was nothing he could do, so he could only use his might to knock these people unconscious. However, this time, as soon as his might exploded out, a world lord level might appeared from the water. In response, Xiao Qin gave a slight smile. It seemed that the main character had arrived. He had already sensed the blue water world and found that it was a universe with complete laws of the heavens and earth. This meant that the blue water world was the same as the great thousand worlds and great worlds in that it could give birth to World Lord. And right now, this aura of a World Lord was clearly the master of the blue water world. After all, the blue water world had never come into contact with the outside world, so it naturally would not change. It was even more impossible for it to be like the land of all living beings, where world lords would spring up like bamboo shoots after the rain. As such, the blue water world was most likely the same as before, with only a single world lord controlling this universe. Now that the main character had appeared, it was much easier. He controlled his might to suppress the hundreds of people present and calmly looked forwards. As Xiao Qin looked on, a blue-skinned but even taller and more muscular humanoid creature appeared before Xiao Qin and Lin Yun. The owner of the blue water world did not attack Xiao Qin and Lin Yun like the others. Perhaps he sensed that Xiao Chun and Lin Yun were not ordinary and were much stronger than him. This was because Xiao Chun could clearly see a trace of fear in his eyes. "I am Lan Yu, may I ask who you are? We're just passing by and have no intention of fighting with the Blue Water World." Hearing this, Lan Yu nodded and then said with a smile, "Don't worry about it. Planet Aqua Blue never interacts with the outside world. If we have offended you, please forgive us." Hearing this, Xiao Chun did not continue to be aggressive. He withdrew the pressure around him, and with Lan Yu present, the people of Planet Aquamarine did not attack again. After all, he was able to suppress them with his aura alone. Even if they all attacked together, they probably wouldn't be a match for him. Of course, the most important thing was that Lan Yu hadn't given the order. Otherwise, even if they couldn't win, they would still charge forward. The people of Aquamarine were simple and extremely united. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun had already experienced this. It didn't have so many tricks up its sleeve. It was just like the land of creation back then. After resolving the misunderstanding for the time being, with Lan Yu's explanation, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun also had a preliminary understanding of Planet Aqua Blue. Due to Planet Aqua Blue's geographical location, it had been excluded from the mainstream society of heaven and earth since its birth. People from the outside world rarely came here, and the Aquamarine people would never leave their hometown. Although there were still a few people who came to Planet Aqua Blue over the years, and the ancient books on Planet Aqua Blue also introduced it, it was very rare. Therefore, Planet Aqua Blue knew almost nothing about the outside world. As for the situation of Planet Aqua Blue itself, it was very simple. Under Lan Yu's rule, there were countless tribes. However, there were basically no conflicts between these tribes. On the contrary, many tribes loved each other and helped each other. This was the custom of Planet Aqua Blue. Because of this, life on Planet Aqua Blue was very stable and peaceful. It could be considered a rare Pure Land. Even the Great War in the Origin world did not affect it at all. After chatting with Lan Yu for a while, Lan Yu finally said with a smile, "Speaking of which, it's a coincidence that an outsider came recently. He's currently at my residence." "There's another outsider?" Hearing this, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun were both stunned. Who would come to a remote place like Planet Aqua Blue at this time? With some curiosity and Lan Yu's warm invitation, in the end, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun followed Lan Yu all the way to his residence. "Brother Lan Yu, did this outsider say where he came from?" "He said that he came from a continent called the Land of All Living Beings. After chatting with him, I really look forward to that Land of All Living Beings." Lan Yu smiled. Hearing this, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun were even more stunned. Someone from the Land of All Living Beings? Who? Someone from the Sacred Temple? But no one from the Sacred Temple seemed to have left recently. Could it be another force? That was impossible. Now that the Source State had just joined the Land of All Living Beings, everyone was busy snatching the resources of the Source State. Who would come to such a place for no reason? Wasn't it better to go to the Source State to snatch the resources left behind by the ancestors? They were a little confused. Who had arrived at Planet Aqua Blue before them? Following behind Lan Yu, the two of them soon arrived at their destination. Everyone on Planet Aqua Blue lived under the sea. After all, Planet Aqua Blue did not have a continent, not even a small island. Moreover, the people on Planet Aqua Blue had long adapted to life in the sea. They were not used to living on land. They did not see any clues before, but when Xiao Chun and Lin Yun arrived at the bottom of the sea, they suddenly felt enlightened. The first thing they saw was an underwater city. The city was not protected by walls, and the style of the houses was completely different from the Land of All Living Beings. But other than that, they could still see the prosperity of this underwater city. The area was very large, and this was Lan Yu's residence. At the same time, it was also the largest city on Planet Aqua Blue. It was the absolute center of the entire planet Aqua Blue. With Lan Yu leading the way, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun did not encounter any obstacles along the way. Everywhere they passed, although many people on planet Aqua Blue looked at them curiously, no one dared to come up and cause trouble. It was obvious that Lan Yu's prestige here was very high. They arrived at his residence and entered a very luxurious courtyard door. It was also a self-contained space, but it was also at the bottom of the sea. In this regard, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun did not feel uncomfortable. After all, with their cultivation, there was almost no difference between being in the water and being on land. At most, they liked it and disliked it. Compared to the bottom of the sea, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun naturally preferred to be on land. However, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Moreover, it was simply a pipe dream to find a piece of land on planet Aqua Blue. After entering the cave, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun came to a small courtyard and finally saw the guest that Lan Yu had mentioned. Seeing this person, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun were stunned. Why was this guy here? Please collect, vote, recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 3064. When they heard Lan Yu say that this person claimed to be from the land of all living beings, they were very curious. Who could travel thousands of miles to planet Aqua Blue? However, when they saw the person in front of them, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun were stunned. The person in front of them was none other than Mu Lingxian, who had been training outside. Haha, how is it? You didn't expect this, right? Mu Lingxian said with a smile when he saw Xiao Chen and Lin Yun's stunned faces. Why are you here? Lin Yun said in annoyance. I happened to be outside, so I rushed over to meet you guys. Let's go to Heaven's Pole and Earth's End together. Mu Lingxian had planned to go there personally from the beginning. He didn't mention it before because he wanted to give the two of them a surprise. Lan Yu was also puzzled when he saw how familiar the three of them were. You guys know each other? The three of them nodded. Not only did they know each other, but they couldn't be more familiar with each other. Although they were tricked by Mu Lingxian, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun were still very happy to be able to meet him here. Under Lan Yu's warm hospitality, the three of them drank to their heart's content. The wine on planet Aqua Blue was completely different from the outside world. Gung En had two different flavors, but it was still very delicious. Xiao Chen was an avid drinker. Before he left, Xiao Chen did not hesitate to pack up a lot of planet Aquamarine's fine wines. They didn't stay on planet Aqua Blue for long. Anyway, they had to pass by this place on their way back. Xiao Chen and the other two planned to go to Heaven's End first. He also asked Lan Yu about the sky's pole and Earth's end, but Lan Yu had no idea. According to him, there was an area full of void storms north of planet Aqua Blue. This area was a dead land. Even if he had the cultivation of a world lord, he didn't dare to enter. This was because the void storms here were completely different from ordinary void storms. Even a world lord had the risk of dying. Because of this, Lan Yu had never been to Heaven's End. Since they didn't get any useful information from Lan Yu, Xiao Chen and the other two didn't stay any longer. They quickly bid farewell and left. They passed through planet Aqua Blue and continued to fly through the starry sky. Not long after, the three of them arrived at the mysterious area that Lan Yu had mentioned. As expected, it was shrouded by a terrifying void storm. The power was extremely strong, and the world lords did not dare to enter. However, Xiao Chen and the other two were far stronger than the world lord. They carefully entered, and a layer of spirit energy formed a shield around them, blocking the violent storm around them. This place is really strange. There's no spiritual energy at all. That's right. It seems like there's only the void storm around. Xiao Chen and the other two discussed as they advanced cautiously. This was indeed the first time the three of them had seen such a mystical place. It was likely that many cultivators were familiar with void storms. However, a normal void storm would not have such power. Even a world lord would be afraid of it. The deeper they went, the more violent the storm became. Moreover, Xiao Chun and the others could faintly sense that the storm actually contained a trace of the energy of the laws. This was even more strange. The void storm actually contained the power of the laws. Perhaps this was the reason why the void storm here was so powerful. With the addition of the laws, its power had indeed increased by a lot. However, with the strength of Xiao Chun and the other two, it was still considered easy for them so far. At least the void storm could not cause any harm to the three of them. As they advanced, their speed slowed down a lot. The deeper they went, the stronger the storm became. At this point, the power of the storm was probably something that even ancient creatures could not withstand. Fortunately, Xiao Chun and the others had come personally. Otherwise, if they had sent their subordinates, they probably wouldn't have been able to walk out of this void storm. They definitely had to go in together. There were no signs of living creatures around. It was dead silent. After an unknown amount of time, the three of them finally broke through the void storm. However, what greeted them was a huge spatial fault. No, the entire starry sky seemed to have been cut in half. It was like a valley, but also like an abyss. On both sides of the abyss, there seemed to be a mysterious force that separated the two sides. They couldn't see what was on the other side at all. It was like a mirror, and they could only see the impressions of Xiao Chun and the others. This is the extremity of heaven and the end of earth? Mu Lingxian asked curiously as she looked at everything in front of her. It was really too strange. It was the first time that Xiao Chun and the others had seen such a strange spectacle. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun were also amazed by this. Was this the end of heaven and earth? Slowly approaching the fault, Xiao Chun slowly reached out to touch it. He realized that his palm seemed to have touched something invisible. He couldn't pass through it and was directly blocked here. It was a very strange thing that he had never experienced before. However, when his palm touched the fault, Xiao Chun acutely felt an aura. This aura seemed to be coming from the other side of the fault. Although he had never come into contact with such an aura, Xiao Chun believed that this aura definitely belonged to those foreign races. In other words, those foreign races were on the other side of the fault. Although they hadn't met them yet, they could clearly sense that this was the first time they had come into contact with them. The aura of these foreign races, not only Xiao Chun, but Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian also sensed it. It was powerful, but unlike spiritual energy, it was a completely different type of energy. But even so, the aura made Xiao Chun, Lin Yun, and the others feel a little pressured. It was no wonder that even the ancestors were so cautious against the foreign races. They were indeed powerful. Now that the spatial fault was obstructing them, the foreign races couldn't enter this world. However, no one knew how long this spatial fault could last. Once it was broken, the foreign races would probably be able to march straight in. Xiao Chun had no idea how powerful the foreign race was as a whole. Furthermore, he had a bold idea. Is there any way to pass through this spatial fault? Xiao Chun asked indifferently. Upon hearing his words, Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian were taken aback. Then, they said in disbelief, "Are you crazy?" Judging from the aura alone, they could tell that the foreign races weren't weak. In fact, some of them weren't weaker than the three of them. But Xiao Chun actually wanted to pass through the spatial fault. Wasn't he asking for death? Based on the information they had, the foreign races didn't have a good impression of them. They would either submit to them or be destroyed. Even so, Xiao Chun still wanted to pass through the spatial fault. Wasn't he asking for death? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 3065. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian were speechless when they heard Xiao Chun's words. Not only did he come to the extreme land, but he also wanted to cross the spatial fault to meet the alien race. Mu Lingxian was speechless. He's really not afraid of death. Xiao Chun, even if you want to die, you don't have to be in such a hurry. With just the three of us, wouldn't we just be sending ourselves to our deaths? The three of them were very powerful, but they couldn't possibly fight against the entire alien race. After all, even the ancestors were so wary of them. What could Shao Chun and the other two do? Moreover, if the alien race harbored evil intentions, the three of them might not even be able to escape safely. In response, Shao Chun simply replied with an indifferent tone. I didn't say that I want to fight with the alien race. I just want to see what the alien race looks like. Shao Chun had never seen the alien race before, so he was naturally curious. He wanted to know who these fellows from another world were and how they were different from him. While Shao Chun was trying to cross the spatial fault, on the other side, someone from the alien race also sensed the aura of Shao Chun and the other two. Someone's coming. After an elder confirmed that there were people on the other side of the spatial fault and that they weren't weak, he immediately turned around and returned to the huge palace. In the palace, the elder said respectfully to the middle-aged man in the main seat, Your Honor, someone from the land of 1,000 stars seems to have come to the spatial fault, and they aren't weak. Hearing this, the middle-aged man on the main seat didn't have much of a change in expression and said lightly, They're finally here? They must be the people who killed the ancestors. The middle-aged man had obviously interacted with the ancestors and was very familiar with the land of 1,000 stars. He knew that the ancestors had been defeated. As he spoke, the middle-aged man slowly stood up and smiled. Since they're here, let's meet them. I also want to see who killed those old guys. They were also curious about Shao Chun, but the old man didn't dare to say anything. Soon, the two of them disappeared on the spot. If Shao Chun were here, he would definitely be surprised. Regardless of whether it was the middle-aged man or the old man, their strength was not weaker than him and Lin Yun. Especially the middle-aged man, his aura was even stronger. Judging from his aura alone, his strength was probably above Shao Chun and Lin Yun. As for the old man, he was at least on par with Shao Chun and Lu Xian. Most importantly, no one knew where these two were ranked among the foreign races. Were they the strongest, or were they only considered to be strong? Were there people stronger than them? Or, in other words, how many people were there in the outsiders who were as strong as them? To Shao Chun and the others, this foreign race was a mysterious and powerful existence. The middle-aged man arrived at the spatial fault in a flash. More than 10 people present saluted him respectfully as he arrived. Greetings, Your Honor. Among these people, the weakest was comparable to an ancient life form. The middle-aged man nodded slightly and said lightly, Open up a hole. I want to gradually let in the people from the domain of infinite stars. More than 10 people nodded respectfully and then attacked together. They gathered all their strength and opened up a hole in the spatial fault. The opening wasn't big and could only allow one person to pass through. Moreover, it seemed that it wasn't easy to maintain this passage. The middle-aged man calmly walked through the opening. At the same time, on the other side, Shao Chun, Lin Yun, and Mu Lingxian also found a way to open up the fault. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian attacked and forcefully opened up a hole in the fault like those foreign races. Mu Lingxian said helplessly after successfully tearing open a hole. Brother Shao Chun, are you really going? I'll be back soon. Don't worry, it'll be fine. In response, Shao Chun said casually without the slightest hint of nervousness. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian had to maintain the hole, so they couldn't enter with Shao Chun. As soon as he stepped in, he was greeted by an extremely mystical place. The sky was no longer dark. Instead, there was a Milky Way that emitted a silver light. In addition, there were also colorful auroras that appeared from time to time. It was extremely beautiful. He had never seen such a beautiful place. The starry sky had completely disappeared and was replaced by a Milky Way. It was magnificent. He didn't know if he had passed through the spatial fault. But just as Shao Chun was marveling inwardly, a figure also walked over from the opposite side. He wore a purple robe and a jade crown on his head. His appearance was valiant and extraordinary. As soon as he appeared, he said with a smile, "This is just the middle zone between two spatial faults. You can say that it's the intersection of two worlds." The middle-aged man was the Your Honor that the foreign races had mentioned. Upon seeing the middle-aged man, a strange glint flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. Then, he said with a smile, "I didn't think that the foreign races would look like this." The middle-aged man didn't get angry upon hearing those words. Instead, he chuckled softly and said, "That's right. Foreign races? That's an interesting name. Come to think of it, we're not that different. We're just born in different worlds." Different worlds? That's right. There's naturally more than one world. No one knows how many there are. The world I'm born in just happens to border the realm of myriad stars. It's just that the spatial fault in the realm of myriad stars has never been broken, so there's no chance for you to come in contact with the outside world. The middle-aged man seemed very easygoing, but Xiao Chen didn't underestimate him. He didn't leak any aura, but Xiao Chen was sure that this person was very powerful, perhaps even more powerful than himself. For there to be such an existence among the foreign races, his strength couldn't be underestimated. It was no wonder that the progenitors were so afraid of him. The two of them looked at each other without any hostility. It was as if they were old friends chatting calmly. "I heard that you defeated the progenitors. Are you in charge of the realm of myriad stars now?" he asked casually. In response, Xiao Chen didn't hide anything. "We won by luck. However, I don't think it'll be peaceful for long." While speaking, Xiao Chen glanced at the middle-aged man indifferently. It was obvious that he was hinting at something. Originally, after dealing with the progenitors and the origin world, this world should be peaceful again. However, because of the middle-aged man and the other foreign races, it was impossible. Knowing what Xiao Chen meant, the middle-aged man said nonchalantly, "You want peace? That's easy. Submit to us and you can avoid war. At that time, the realm of myriad stars will welcome true peace." "As a slave or a servant, huh?" Xiao Chen replied plainly in response. Please add vote recommend. Chapter 3066. Xiao Chen definitely did not want to be subservient and enslaved by others. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "You're right. We've been planning for the land of 10,000 stars for too long. You have no other choice but to submit." The middle-aged man and the rest had been planning for the land of 10,000 stars since the founding of the primogenitors. Even if the primogenitors died, it wouldn't change anything. They were determined to get the land of 10,000 stars and no one could stop them. "Are you so confident that you can win?" Confidence comes from strength. Xiao Chen didn't know much about the outside world, but the middle-aged man knew it very well. The middle-aged man looked at Xiao Chen as soon as he finished speaking. "The land of 10,000 stars has always been isolated, and we don't know anything about the outside world. Naturally, we don't know the strength of the outside world." With that, the middle-aged man raised his hand slowly and slapped at Xiao Chen. It didn't feel earth-shattering at all. It was like a casual slap. However, Xiao Chen's eyes narrowed in the face of the middle-aged man's sudden attack. He immediately used his hand as a sword and slashed out. The sword and the palm print collided fiercely and gradually disappeared after the collision in the air. The middle-aged man wasn't weak. Moreover, this slap seemed to be showing off his strength to Xiao Chen. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "You're not weak. However, it's not impossible for me to defeat you. You're probably the strongest person in the land of 10,000 stars, right?" The middle-aged man guessed Xiao Chen's position in the land of 10,000 stars. He was right. Xiao Chen was indeed the strongest person in the land of 10,000 stars. Xiao Chen didn't answer because he didn't know what the middle-aged man meant. The middle-aged man looked at the middle-aged man faintly. Under Xiao Chen's gaze, the middle-aged man smiled. It's difficult for you to even deal with me, but in our world, I'm not the strongest existence. There are stronger existences above me. Do you understand? The middle-aged man's meaning was very clear. There was a huge difference in strength between them. The strongest person in the land of infinite stars was only on par with him. Even if he fought with Shao Chen, he was confident that he could win. However, in the world that the middle-aged man was in, he wasn't the strongest existence. If Shao Chen couldn't even deal with him, how could he deal with those stronger people? Therefore, the realm of 10,000 stars had no chance of winning if they wanted to fight back. Their only choice was to submit. If we don't fight, no one will know what the final result will be. Moreover, you guys can't enter now. Maybe we'll improve by then? Shao Chen said faintly. Hearing this, the middle-aged man smiled faintly. The spatial fault is indeed troublesome, but how long can it last? As for the increase in your strength, how much can it increase? Those old fellows that you call the primogenitors have been here before. They know what the wisest choice is. But now these old fellows are no longer here. You all control the domain of infinite stars. I hope that you all can make the wisest choice. That's enough. The spatial fault will be forced out in 100 years at most. At that time, I hope you can give me the answer I want the most. Having said that, the middle-aged man planned to leave. His attack just now was just to show Shao Chen his strength. Seeing the middle-aged man turn around, Shao Chen didn't stop him. After all, this wasn't the place to fight. Moreover, Shao Chen wasn't confident that he could win against the middle-aged man. In addition, Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian wouldn't be able to maintain the gap for too long. After saying so much, it was time to leave. The two of them turned around and left the central area of the spatial fault. When the middle-aged man returned safely, the people in charge of maintaining the gap heaved a sigh of relief and asked respectfully, "My lord, how is it? He's stronger than those old fellows and harder to deal with. I'm afraid it'll take some effort to conquer the land of infinite stars." In response, the middle-aged man said faintly, what they had discussed with the primogenitors of the origin world was no longer valid after the destruction of the origin world. As for Shao Chen, from the simple conversation they had with him, it was impossible to make them submit directly. In response, the group of experts remained silent. Did those old fellows want to become even stronger? Ask the Northern Region King to come too. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to do it alone. The middle-aged man muttered softly. However, his words shocked the others. The world they were in had been completely unified. The Northern Region King was at the same level as the middle-aged man. He was one of the 4 heavenly kings of this world. Each of them was extremely strong. Originally, the middle-aged man was in charge of the land of infinite stars. However, he had proactively asked the Northern Region King to come and help. 2 heavenly kings had taken action at the same time. Was the land of infinite stars really that strong? The middle-aged man seemed to know what the others were thinking. He turned around and looked at the spatial fault indifferently. Don't underestimate any of your opponents. They're not weak. They're much stronger than before. I don't have the confidence to defeat that person just now. The middle-aged man admitted that he didn't have the confidence to defeat Shao Chen. For a moment the crowd was curious. What had happened to the land of infinite stars? How did it become so strong all of a sudden? They had to ask the 2 heavenly kings to take action. However, since the middle-aged man had said so, the crowd nodded in agreement. Seeing this, the middle-aged man threw down a sentence and walked away. Continue to speed up. Break the spatial fault as soon as possible. We've wasted too much time. Yes, my lord. Everyone nodded in agreement. On the other side, Shao Chen, who had returned from the spatial fault, saw Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian. After Shao Chen came out, the 2 of them retrieved their power and closed the gap. Then, they looked at Shao Chen. How was it? We saw an alien. How was it? They didn't expect Xiao Chen to see an alien. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian were curious. What was this rumored alien? Was it strong? Xiao Chen shook his head helplessly and smiled bitterly. Very strong. He's not the strongest person. There are stronger people in their world. However, that person's strength isn't weaker than mine. He wasn't the strongest person, but his strength wasn't weaker than Xiao Chen's. Hearing this, Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian's expressions became unusually solemn. The two of them knew very well how strong Xiao Chen was in the land of infinite stars. However, compared to the alien, he wasn't at the top level. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3067. The strength of the other races was much stronger than they had imagined. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian were both very solemn in the face of such a powerful other race. They didn't know if they had a chance of winning. Let's go back first. It will be very difficult for them to break through the spatial fault in a short time, Xiao Chen said. After personally coming to the end of the world and witnessing the spatial fault and the other race, Xiao Chen understood that the primogenitor's records were not groundless. The other race's strength was indeed frightening. At the same time, it was like a mountain that weighed down on everyone's hearts. Right now, there were only two choices in front of Xiao Chen and the others. They could either submit or resist. Although they could avoid a great battle if they submitted, no one knew what the outcome would be. They couldn't control how the other race would treat them. However, if they didn't choose to submit, they could only fight. From the looks of it, the other race's strength was much stronger than they had imagined. The only piece of good news was probably the spatial fault. The spatial fault that separated the two worlds had stopped the other race's advance. They still needed time to break through the spatial fault. This also gave Xiao Chen and the others a chance to catch their breath. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian nodded in agreement. Then, the three of them left the spatial fault. They first returned to planet Aqua Blue, but they didn't stay there for long. They only rested for a day before returning to the land of living beings. This round trip took Xiao Chen and the others a month. When the three of them returned to the sacred hall, Qin Shuru, Lu Bingning, and the others had already returned from Yuan province. Husband. Qin Shuru and the others were delighted to see Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen also smiled in response. How was it? Was it serious? They clustered around Xiao Chen and sat down in the pavilion. Xiao Chen nodded in response. Knowing that the women were asking about the other race, Xiao Chen didn't hide anything. The women's expressions instantly turned grave. If even Xiao Chen said so, then the other race's strength really shouldn't be underestimated. In response, Xiao Chen chuckled. There's still time. There's no need to be so nervous. This was a small consolation. Hearing this, the girls nodded. After chatting for a while, Xiao Chen went straight to the main hall. Mo He, Ancestor He, Dongfang Yun, Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, and Li Tian all rushed over. After returning from the extreme heavens and extreme earth, he naturally had to tell everyone the news. This time, many people had gathered in the main hall. It could be said that all of the primordial creatures and sacred ancestors were present. Just as Xiao Chen arrived, an aura soared into the sky from the depths of the sacred palace. Feeling this aura, Xiao Chen was slightly stunned. This was Little Qing's aura. It looked like he was about to come out of seclusion. After defeating the primogenitors, Little Qing chose to go into seclusion. It seemed that she had succeeded. Little Qing should have gained a lot from her seclusion this time. Her strength must have increased tremendously. As expected, Little Qing soon appeared in the hall. Xiao Chen smiled slightly when he sensed the aura on Little Qing's body. Little Qing had indeed become much stronger. This was naturally good news for everyone. The stronger Little Qing was, the more confident they would be when dealing with the alien race. So many people. Something happened? Little Qing only knew about the alien race. She did not know that Xiao Qin and the rest had already seen the alien race. Therefore, as soon as she appeared, she looked at Xiao Qin strangely and asked, "Alien race?" In response, Xiao Qin only gave a simple reply. Hearing that, little Qing's face darkened and she did not say anything else. Now that everyone was present, Xiao Qin went straight to the point and told everyone what he knew so far, word for word. After hearing that the alien race was so strong, everyone fell silent. This included Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian. They had just dealt with the primogenitors, and now another alien race had appeared. Moreover, it was even stronger. This made everyone's mood sour. This was especially so for little Qing. She had just come out of seclusion when she heard this news. After that, Xiao Qin said one last thing. What we need to do now is to make a decision. Do we choose to submit or resist? Submitting could naturally prevent a war, but no one knew what the final outcome would be. Would they become slaves or something else? If they resisted, there would undoubtedly be a huge battle. In response, almost no one hesitated, and they made their choice. Everyone agreed that they could not submit. Only by resisting would they have a chance. No one knew what the outcome would be if one side of the world submitted to another side of the world, but it would definitely not be good. Seeing this, Xiao Qin smiled and said, "In that case, we need to prepare in advance." Now that there was a spatial fault, the alien race could not attack. This was the time for everyone to prepare. How to prepare? Naturally, they would do everything they could to increase their own strength. They would use all the resources in the world to forcefully increase everyone's strength again. In order to resist the alien race, strength was naturally indispensable. There's no need to reserve origin energy and all kinds of treasures. Use them all and give them to those with talent. Let them increase their own cultivation as much as possible in the shortest time possible. No one present had any objections to using all kinds of resources to increase everyone's strength. This was the best way and the only thing they could do. If they could create more experts, their chances of victory would increase. As for the problem of candidates, it was up to Xianyuan Ling, Li Tian, and the others to choose. Once selected, these people would be able to obtain the resources of the Divine Temple unconditionally. They could even come to the Divine Temple to cultivate. This was definitely a great opportunity for them. This was the arrangement for the cultivators below. After the matter was settled, Xianyuan Ling, Li Tian, and the others left. Only Xiao Qin, Lin Yun, the divine ancestors, and little Qing were left in the hall. The arrangements for the cultivators below had been made. Next, it was time for everyone. Everyone had top-notch combat strength, but at the moment, they were still inferior to the alien race. As for ordinary treasures, to be honest, the improvement of Xiao Qin and the others was minimal. It could even be said that they were not of much use at all. In order to fight against the alien race, Xiao Qin and the others had to think of a way to increase their own strength. However, this was very difficult. Even so, they had to think of a way. This was because once the gap between the top-notch combat strength was too big, the outcome would be obvious even if the people below could fight against the alien race. They would need more origin energy or other top-notch treasures. However, such treasures were not easy to obtain even in the entire world. It could even be said that they did not exist at all. Therefore, compared to the cultivators below, the most difficult problem for Xiao Qin and the others to increase their strength was now the most difficult problem. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 3068. The matter of the warriors below was easy to solve. With the Divine Temple's current foundation, they could forcibly produce a group of experts long ago. For example, some outstanding talents of the new generation could at least break through to the path-seeking realm and Tao transformation realm in 100 years if they were nurtured by the Divine Temple. Of course, this also depended on their own talent. Furthermore, Xiao Chun and the others had also mentioned that the most important requirement for the selection of candidates was talent and aptitude, regardless of cultivation level. After all, even if the Divine Temple had a strong foundation, it was impossible for them to give so many treasures to a group of trash. Wouldn't that be a waste of resources? Only Xianyuan Ling, Li Tian, and the other ancient creatures could handle these matters. Now, the most important thing for Xiao Chun and the others was to improve their strength. After all, from the current situation, Xiao Chun and the others were still no match for the foreign races in terms of top combat strength. At our current level, it's extremely difficult to improve even a little. It's really difficult. Emohi sighed helplessly in response. They were different from the warriors below who could pile up their strength with resources. At Xiao Chen's level, to be honest, even if they had resources, it was useless. Unless it was a true treasure of heaven and earth, ordinary treasures would be useless even if they were eaten like candy. This was also the reason why Xiao Chen and the others did not care about the Divine Temple's foundation at all. It was because it was useless to them. At most, they would reward it to the people below or maintain the orthodoxy of the Divine Temple. This matter is difficult, but we have to do it. Even if it's going against the heavens, we have to do our best. Lin Yun said indifferently. Hearing this, everyone sighed. They felt helpless, but there was nothing they could do. For a time, even if they discussed, they could not come up with a good solution. After all, cultivation was not easy to improve, not to mention Xiao Chen and the others who were already at the top of the world. Our cultivation is different. Let's make our own decisions on this matter, and find our own opportunities. In the end, it was Xiao Chen who spoke. Although everyone wanted to increase their strength, it wasn't something that could be done just because they wanted to. There was no other way. Xiao Chen could only let everyone think of a solution. As for whether they would succeed in the end, who could guarantee it? Although the crowd felt helpless, there was nothing they could do. Then let's disperse. Our main task now is to improve ourselves. Little Qing, who was sitting beside Xiao Chen, didn't say anything. After fusing with the primogenitors, his strength had increased a lot. What he needed to do next was to continue fusing with the remaining energy and increase his strength. Little Qing had no way to deal with Xiao Chen and the others. Even though he was a spirit of heaven and earth, after reaching the level of Xiao Chen and the others, he no longer had any treasures that could help them. After all, they were all in the same realm. Each and every one of them had a solemn look in their eyes. However, that was all they could do at the moment. Everyone dissipated on the spot. Clearly they had left. Xiao Chen did the same. However, when they returned to their residence, Xiao Qing followed them. Are the outsiders really that strong? Xiao Qing didn't waste any time and immediately asked. In response, Xiao Chen smiled bitterly. I don't dare to say the specifics because I've only seen the tip of the iceberg. However, that person's strength is indeed above mine. If I fought him head-on, my chances of winning would probably only be 30%. As Xiao Chen spoke, he thought of that middle-aged man. He was indeed very strong and definitely not weaker than Little Qing. Moreover, he didn't know if he had any trump cards. If he did, even 30% would be an exaggeration. Moreover, he still didn't know much about the outsiders. He didn't know how strong they were or what level the middle-aged man belonged to, so he couldn't give an accurate evaluation. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Little Qing fell silent. Only after a long while did she slowly speak. Don't worry and cultivate. I'll go to the extremes of heaven and earth by myself. Xiao Chen didn't refuse. There was no harm in Little Qing going to take a look. After all, there was a spatial fault, so there wouldn't be any danger. All right, be careful. Who else in the world can harm me now? Except you. In response, Little Qing said with a rare smile. However, as soon as she finished speaking, she disappeared. Needless to say, she had already left for the extremes of heaven and earth. She's really impatient. She can't even wait for 15 minutes. Seeing little Qing leave, Shao Chun shook his head and smiled bitterly. In the following period of time, Shao Chun, Lin Yun, and the other divine ancestors all began to think of ways to increase their strength in their own ways. Some went into seclusion, some went out to travel, and there were all sorts of methods. However, Shao Chun didn't go out for the time being. In the cave residence, he emptied his mind and carefully sorted out his life's experiences. These were all treasures. They were his cultivation experiences. Perhaps he would be able to gain something with the help of reviewing the past and learning new things. Every primogenitor was immersed in cultivation. They were under a lot of pressure, so they didn't pay attention to what was happening in the outside world. Half a month later, as the divine temple passed down a decree, the entire land of all beings was in an uproar. The content of the decree was very simple. The divine temple opened its doors and recruited disciples. They could receive personal guidance from the divine temple's experts and also receive cultivation resources from the divine temple. Moreover, this time, the disciples weren't recruited based on background. They only looked at talent and aptitude. As long as they could pass the divine temple's assessment, they could join the divine temple. Moreover, even if you were a disciple of another sect, there was no conflict. The divine temple didn't care about that. While ensuring your identity, you could still come to the divine temple to cultivate. Such a condition naturally made countless people go crazy. Even the sky prides of the major sects were extremely excited. That was because the divine temple didn't care about their identity and didn't require them to leave their original sections. This made them have no worries. Moreover, the divine temple was the only overlord of the land of all beings. It was needless to say what it meant to be able to join the divine temple to cultivate. It was definitely a huge opportunity. There had always been a saying in the land of all beings. As long as the divine temple was willing, even a pig could be nurtured into an ancestor realm expert. It was even possible for the divine temple to become a world lord. Regardless of whether this was true or false, it wasn't difficult to see the divine temple's foundation. The divine temple monopolized 70% of the treasures in the land of all beings. This was no joke. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3069. Since the establishment of the land of all living beings, this was the first time the Sacred Hall had publicly selected disciples. There were countless people who wanted to join the Sacred Hall in the land of all living beings, but the Sacred Hall had never taken in any disciples. This time, the Sacred Hall's sudden action naturally attracted many people's attention. The location of the test was set in the 4 great sacred cities, not far from the Sacred Hall. Of course, this was only the preliminary test. If one couldn't even pass the preliminary test, there was no need for them to enter the Sacred Hall. Once the news spread, countless young geniuses and experts of the older generation rushed to the 4 great sacred cities. The young geniuses and geniuses naturally rushed to join the Sacred Hall, while the experts of the older generation came to watch the show. At this moment, the people living in the East Saint City could see the famous experts from the land of all living beings arriving every day. The Wang clan is here. And the Chun clan's genius. Geniuses gathered in the Sacred Hall one after another. Even a large sect like the Star Sect came. Lu Mu brought a few genius disciples from the Star Sect into the East Saint City. Along the way, many people looked at them in surprise. The current Star Sect was definitely one of the strongest sects in the land of all living beings. Especially after merging with the Tianqi sect, their strength had risen to another level. They didn't expect even the people from the Star Sect to come. It could be seen how attractive the Sacred Hall was to these genius disciples. Senior brother, can we really join the Sacred Hall this time? Ignoring the surrounding people's surprise, a disciple from the Star Sect asked Lu Mu nervously. In response, Lu Mu was relatively calm. Don't worry about that. Just show your true strength. They came to a property of the Star sect in the East Saint City. Seeing Lu Mu's arrival, the shopkeeper bowed respectfully. Greetings, young master. No need for formalities. Prepare a few rooms. I've already prepared them. Young master, please follow me. The test was imminent, so Lu Mu needed to adjust his state. Although he was very confident in his talent, he still couldn't let his guard down in the Sacred Hall's test. In terms of talent, Lu Mu was definitely the top existence in the land of all living beings. Those who could beat him were probably only the second generation of the saint ancestors like Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao. After all, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao were born with silver spoons in their mouth. They couldn't be compared. The examination was set to begin 5 days later. During these 5 days, more and more people came to the 4 great holy cities. Just in the East Sage City alone, it was unknown how many monstrous geniuses had gathered. There were no less than 3 peerless geniuses like Lu Mu. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, the sound of bells rang out in the Eastern Sage City. This was the signal for the start of the examination. In the most important main square of East Saint City, there were already cultivators from the temple present. They were the ones in charge of the assessment. Many young geniuses and older warriors gathered around, wanting to witness this grand event with their own eyes. Although there were a lot of people, no one dared to break the rules. After all, there were many powerhouses from the temple present, and no one dared to offend the temple. Back then, the Heavenly Enlightenment sect was a living example. They seemed powerful, but in front of the sacred temple, they were still unable to withstand a single blow. Lu Mu from the Star sect, Wang family's Wang Kuan, and the Shadow Sword sect's Wu Xia. Everyone looked at the 3 people at the front. These 3 people should be the most talented among the crowd. Whether it was the Star sect, the Wang family, or the Shadow Sword sect, they were all powerful forces that were second only to the sacred temple in the land of all living beings. Each of them dominated a region, and no one dared to provoke them. Usually, it was rare to see even one of these geniuses, let alone 3 of them. But today, all 3 of them were gathered here because of the sacred temple's examination. And this was only the East Sage City. In the other 3 holy cities, there were bound to be other geniuses like these 3 who had arrived. I didn't expect the 2 of you to be here too. Lu Mu, aren't you in the Yuan state? Why, don't you want the treasure? The 3 of them stood side by side. They were old acquaintances, and Wang Kuan said with a smile. Hearing this, Lu Mu replied nonchalantly. Then why are you here? You don't even want the Wang family's ancestral land? I heard that your Wang family's ancestral land is about to open. Are you willing to give up the inheritance of your ancestors? Haha, compared to the sacred temple, the inheritance of my ancestors is naturally nothing. Wang Kuan was carefree and said bluntly. No matter how strong the Wang family was, could they be stronger than the sacred temple? So, between the 2, Wang Kuan chose the sacred temple without hesitation. The 2 of them chatted. As for Wu Xia, she was silent and just waited for the examination to begin. Not long after, a World Lord-level expert from the sacred temple announced that the examination had officially begun. This is a star stone. It can be used to test one's foundation and comprehension. The first round of the examination is like this. Anyone who can light up a 5-colored star stone is considered to have passed. The expert from the sacred temple took out a giant stone that was dozens of meters tall from his space ring and shouted loudly. Everyone was not unfamiliar with the sky star stone. However, such a huge and complete piece of sky star stone was extremely rare. And the entire star stone was said to be able to light up 9 colors. Under normal circumstances, those who could light up 3 colors were already considered geniuses. At least in the Star sect, being able to light up 3 colors was already meeting the standard. But here in the sacred temple, lighting up 5 colors was merely passing the preliminary examination. The sacred temple's requirements are really high. Only with 5 colors is considered to have passed. Looks like many people are going to be eliminated. Hearing that, Wang Kun smiled and said with a strange look in his eyes. Of course, he was not worried about himself. As a top genius in the land of all living beings, the 5-colored star stone could not stop him. However, many of the accompanying Wang family disciples would probably not be able to meet the requirement. Young disciples lined up one after another and tested their foundation and talent in front of the star stone. However, after more than 10 people went over, not a single person could meet the requirement. Most people only lit up 2 or 3 colors. Those who were better lit up 4 colors. However, no one with 5 colors appeared. Those who failed left dejectedly. They missed the opportunity to enter the sacred temple just like that. After more than 20 people, there was finally one person who met the standard. However, he only managed to light up 5 colors. Seeing the 5-colored light on the star stone, the surrounding people cried out in surprise. The way they looked at the person changed instantly. Joining the temple was like a carp leaping over the dragon gate. However, the expert from the sacred temple, who was in charge of the examination, did not change his expression. 5-colored barely passed. Go over there and wait. In response, the person smiled bitterly. He was talented in the sect, but in the sacred temple, he was only barely qualified. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3070. He was already considered a top genius in his own sect, but when he came to the temple, he was only barely qualified. This made this young heaven's pride feel bitter, but he still passed the test. They came to a designated area to wait. Those who had passed the preliminary test would be agreed to be brought to the temple after the test was over. Of course, this didn't mean that they had reached the standard. There were still subsequent tests waiting for them. After this young heaven's pride passed, hundreds of others successfully reached the standard. Among them, the one with the best result. He lit up a 7-colored star stone, which shocked many people. It seemed like there were a lot of people, but in fact, the passing rate was very low, less than 10%. One had to know that hundreds of thousands of people came to take the preliminary test, but so far, not even 1,000 people had passed. At this rate, only around 10,000 people would be able to pass the preliminary test. However, this was almost the same as the temple's expectations. According to Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian's idea, they should focus more resources on the fewest people. They should focus on cultivating true heaven's prides and put an end to any incompetent people. Being able to cultivate an ancestor realm master was obviously much better than cultivating 10 emperor realm masters. This was something everyone knew. Therefore, Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian were more willing to focus resources on true heaven's prides. Those who passed the preliminary test were all excited, secretly looking forward to becoming a member of the temple in the future. As for those who didn't reach the standard, they could only secretly regret and leave helplessly. There was no other way. If one's talent wasn't enough, it would be impossible to solve it in a short time, let alone muddle through in front of the temple. After the young heaven's prides were tested one after another, it was finally Wang Kun, Lu Mu, and Wu Xia's turn. These 3 could be said to be the top talents in East Saint City. The other young heaven's prides couldn't be compared to them. For a moment, many people were looking forward to seeing how talented these 3 were. The first person to be called was Wang Kun. Hearing this, Wang Kun smiled slightly to Lu Mu and Wu Xia. You too, I'll go first. Unlike the others, Wang Kun wasn't worried at all. He had absolute confidence in his talent. If he couldn't pass the preliminary test, then Wang Kun was sure that 99% of the younger generation in the land of living beings wouldn't be able to pass. The expert from the sacred hall spoke in a deep voice when he saw Wang Kun as he strode towards the sky star stone. Let's begin. Hearing this, Wang Kun pressed his arm on the heavenly star stone. Instantly, a bright light erupted. In the blink of an eye, the 5-colored light had already lit up. This proved that Wang Kun had met the requirements, but clearly, this was not Wang Kun's limit. Then the 6th color, the 7th color, and the 8th color. When the heavenly star stone lit up with 8 colors, everyone present couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. 8-colored celestial starstone. This Wang Kun's talent is truly extraordinary. What do you think? His reputation is well deserved. For Wang Kun to have such a reputation among the younger generation in the land of all living beings, it was definitely not because of flattery, but because of his own abilities. Even after reaching 8 colors, Wang Kun did not stop. In fact, if he wanted to get better treatment in the Divine Temple, he would have to show more of himself. Only by having the strongest value could the Divine Temple value him. Those who obviously had strength but still wanted to disguise themselves were simply idiots in Wang Kun's eyes. If you have talent, why don't you show it? Are you afraid that others will be jealous of you? This could only be said to be overthinking. In the Divine Temple, what kind of talent had they not seen before? If you did not show it, the Divine Temple would not value you at all, and the resources you would receive in the future would not be much. In the end, under everyone's gaze, Wang Kun's result was fixed at 8.5 colors. He was just a little bit away from fully lighting up the 9-colored talent. Not bad. So far, Wang Kun was considered the person with the best result. Even the expert from the Divine Temple nodded his head in praise. Thank you, sir. In response, Wang Kun did not dare to be arrogant and hurriedly bowed respectfully. Even though his Wang family also had a world master, their statuses were completely different. To put it bluntly, the Wang family's world master was definitely incomparable to the expert from the shrines in front of him. After Wang Kun finished his test, it was Wu Xia's turn next. Wu Xia, who was not good with words, directly came before the star stone and pressed his hand on it like Wang Kun. 8.5 colors, another 8.5 color talent. The Shadow Sword Sex Wu Xia's talent is actually not inferior to Wang Kun's. Of course, it is said that the two of them fought half a year ago in the Yuan province, and in the end, neither could do anything to the other. Wu Xia's talent was not inferior to Wang Kun's. After it ended, Wu Xia bowed to the expert from the Divine Temple in charge of the test, and then went to the designated area to wait. Congratulations, brother Wu Xia. Seeing Wu Xia walk over, Wang Kun smiled and said. In response, Wu Xia only replied with an expressionless face. Isn't this something predestined? There was no trace of joy, as if he already knew the answer. Soon after Wu Xia and Wang Kun finished, Lu Mu also came before the Starstone. The final result was the same as Wang Kun and Wu Xia, 8.5 color talent. The three of them had similar talent. Even if there was any difference, it was not big and could almost be ignored. Looking at the three of them standing together, the other disciples who had also passed the test were all envious. Although they had all passed, they were not idiots who knew that their treatment in the future would definitely not be the same. Even if they all entered the Divine Temple, they would still be divided into different grades and rank. This was something that could not be helped. Without a doubt, if nothing unexpected happened, Lu Mu and the other two would become the first in East Saint City. However, just as everyone was shocked by the three's talents, a Divine Temple expert suddenly appeared in the field, his face full of shock. Seeing this, the Divine Temple expert who had been in charge of the test asked curiously, "What's wrong?" A peerless genius has appeared in West Saint City. It is said that he lit up 9 colors of talent and it was extremely easy. 9 colors of talent. Hearing this, even Lu Mu, Wang Kun, and Wu Xia were stunned. Even they could barely light up 8.5 colors of talent. Then wouldn't that mean that the person with 9 colors of talent was even more talented than them? And that was not the end of their shock. Next, the person continued. That person has already attracted the attention of the divine ancestor, and he has already been taken to the divine temple. Once these words were said, the whole place was in an uproar. This was the true meaning of reaching the heavens in a single bound. Please add, recommend, and vote. Chapter 3071. It was such an honor to be valued by the divine ancestor. If one could be accepted as a disciple by the divine ancestor, it would definitely be a meteoric rise. At the very least, one could do whatever he wanted in the land of all living beings. Who would dare to offend the disciples of the divine ancestor? Moreover, as far as everyone knew, the divine ancestor had never accepted a disciple. Even Wang Kuan, Wu Xia, and Lu Mu could not help but feel envious. They were just one step away, but the results were as different as heaven and earth. If they could also light up the nine-colored talent, would they also be valued by the divine ancestor? Although it was hard to say, it was not like they did not have a chance. After the shock, the test still had to continue. At the same time, in Sacred Palace, the sect leaders and old ancestors of Star Sect, Wang Family, Shadow Sword Sect, and other major sects had received Sacred Palace's invitation and gathered together. Everyone present was a world lord. They had participated in the great battle of the origin world with Shao Qin and the others. They did not understand why Sacred Palace would suddenly gather everyone and openly recruit disciples. However, such a big movement meant that something big must have happened. Therefore, no one dared to delay and immediately rushed to Sacred Palace. Everyone gathered in one of the cave dwellings in Sacred Palace. Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian also appeared at the right time. Everyone stood up and bowed when they saw the two of them. "Greetings, Lord." Everyone present was no stranger to Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian. Even if they did not know them, they had definitely seen them before. It was no exaggeration to say that the people present represented the strongest group of people in the land of all living beings. "Everyone, please rise," Li Tian said indifferently and then slowly sat down. Everyone only dared to sit down when they saw that. After everyone was seated, Xianyuan Ling said indifferently, "Today I have gathered everyone here to tell you something. Although the origin world has been destroyed, we have to pay attention to the matter of the foreign tribes." When they heard the two words foreign races, shock flashed across the eyes of many people. Many of them had heard about the alien races when they were fighting against the origin world. Although they did not understand what the foreign tribes represented, Sacred Palace's actions undoubtedly proved the seriousness of the matter. No one interrupted. Everyone was waiting for Xianyuan Ling to continue. "The outsiders have been coveting us for many years. Even though there's a spatial fault in the way, according to the venerated ancestor, the spatial fault will only last for another 100 years at most. 100 years have passed, and without the obstruction of the spatial fault, the non-humankind can invade us as they please. Furthermore, the outsiders aren't friendly to us." Chapter 3074. It was completely different from the desolation of the outside world. Walking through this quiet path, Lu Yu seemed to have come to a brand new world. The sky was blue, white clouds drifted, and mountains and rivers crisscrossed. This was a world full of life. Moreover, there was a herd of bison running in front of Shao Qin. They were just the most ordinary wild beasts, but this was enough to shock people. A small world that was naturally formed? After sensing it, he found that the spiritual chi in this world was not rich, and the laws were very chaotic. It was like a new world, a brand new small world that was naturally formed by heaven and earth. Xiao Chun was secretly amazed by this. This was simply too exaggerated. He took a step forward and walked into this world. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, who would have believed that there was such a place in the ruins of the great wide world? To Xiao Chun, this natural small world was like a fire seed of life. There might not be any cultivators or beasts here, and everything was the lowest level of life. However, the more this was the case, the more shocking it was. This represented a new life, and it meant that heaven and earth were slowly walking out of the previous destruction. It was like a person who was seriously injured was slowly recovering. It was magical. The small world was not big. With Xiao Chen's speed, he could probably walk through it in a flash. However, he was not in a hurry. Xiao Chen walked unhurriedly. There were a total of 3 villages in the small world. There were people from the humans, the devils, the celestials, and other major races. These people were all ordinary people and did not have any cultivation. In other words, they did not know how to cultivate at all. They worked at sunrise and rested at sunset, maintaining the most primitive way of life. In their eyes, this was a normal life. As for the wonders of the outside world, they could not imagine it at all. When Yangming arrived at one of the villages, he scanned with his spiritual sense. The old people, the children, and everything looked so peaceful. The young men went out to hunt, and the old people gathered in groups of 3 or 5. They took care of the children and chatted casually. As for the women, they either did laundry, cooked, or did some needlework like mending clothes. Time seemed to pass very slowly here. Everyone had a leisurely smile on their faces. Without the existence of martial artists, these people's lives were quiet and peaceful, even though they only lived for a few decades and the longest was no more than a century. As if affected by the surrounding atmosphere, Xiao Chen also had a faint smile on his face as he walked into the village. The sudden appearance of an outsider would definitely attract the attention of many villagers. It was especially so for the children. They all looked at Xiao Chen curiously, thinking that he was a weirdly dressed man. After getting to know him, the children who didn't dare to talk to Xiao Chen before also fell in love with Xiao Chen. Uncle Xiao Chen, tell us about the outside world. We haven't been out there before. Is the outside world very wonderful? Children were full of curiosity about everything. Especially after hearing that Xiao Chen came from the outside world, these children were even more curious about the outside world. In response, Xiao Chen said with a smile, "Okay." He patiently introduced the outside world to the children. Of course, Xiao Chen could omit many things, but he just told these children some interesting things. After listening to Xiao Chen's story, the children's eyes lit up. Turned out that the outside world was so interesting. They also wanted to go there. Uncle Xiao Chen, you said that there are martial artists outside. Are you a martial artist? These children had never come into contact with warriors before. However, Xiao Chen simply shook his head with a smile and said, "That's right. Of course not. Besides, martial artists are not what you think. At most, they are a little stronger than you." Xiao Chen didn't want to teach these people how to cultivate. It was not that he found it troublesome or anything, but he didn't want to disturb the peace here and change everything. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3075. Most of the time, power was the source of chaos. Imagine, if someone in this secluded world knew how to cultivate, then what would be the difference between this place and the outside world in the future? Xiao Chen did not want to disturb this tranquility, so he had no intention of helping these people cultivate. He chatted with this group of little guys until evening. The sun was about to set, and the men who went out to hunt also came back. Knowing that there were guests in the village, these men did not think much. Instead, they warmly greeted Xiao Chen. They had good wine and good food. Everyone chatted happily at the table. Xiao Chen also sat with everyone and chatted like an ordinary person. In the outside world, as the divine ancestor, the person who controlled the fate of the entire world, he was like an ordinary person at this time. However, Xiao Chen liked this kind of life very much. The wine was the most ordinary wine, and the meat was the most ordinary wild beast meat. There was nothing special about it. However, it was this kind of ordinary life that made Xiao Chen feel comfortable. After a lively night, Xiao Chen was arranged to rest by everyone. For the next period of time, Xiao Chen stayed in the village. The villagers were very close to this man who had suddenly appeared. Knowing that Xiao Chen wanted to stay, the villagers helped Xiao Chen build a house without hesitation. Although it was very simple, or even simple, Xiao Chen liked it very much. Since coming to this village, Xiao Chen did not use his spiritual power again. It was as if he had really become an ordinary person. Every day, he went out to hunt with the men in the village. He learned from them and lived like an ordinary person. Haha, Xiao Chen, you're good. Your archery is very accurate. When they went out together, Xiao Chen shot a huge wild boar with his sword. Seeing the wild boar slowly fall to the ground, everyone laughed happily. With this harvest, the people in the village did not have to starve anymore. They all had food to eat. In this regard, Xiao Chen also smiled with satisfaction. He did not use his spiritual power for the arrow just now. He only shot it with the strength of an ordinary person. Otherwise, it would not be as simple as shooting a wild boar to death. He was afraid that the distant mountains would not be able to withstand his arrow. The group of people stepped forward, carried the wild boar, and prepared to return to the village. With Xiao Chen's help, today's hunting went very smoothly. It was still early, so they could still have more time to accompany their wives and children when they got back. Along the way back to the village, Xiao Chen distributed the pork to everyone with a smile while surrounded by the villagers. These days are really not bad. Moreover, my state of mind is slowly changing. Xiao Chen smiled as he returned to his simple farmhouse's courtyard. A gentle breeze blew as he looked at the blue sky. Xiao Chen had been living here for several months. During this time, he had not cultivated at all. However, even if he didn't cultivate, Xiao Chen could clearly feel that his state of mind had undergone subtle changes. Some feelings that he had never felt before began to surface in his heart. Although it was very hazy and even he couldn't tell what it was real. This feeling made Xiao Chen's cultivation seem to have loosened a little. At the same time, he seemed to have understood something, but he was still not sure. At Xiao Chen's cultivation level, it was not so much cultivation as it was cultivation of the mind. Refining spiritual qi and tempering the body had long been meaningless to Xiao Chen. Unlike the cultivation of ordinary warriors, Xiao Chen had already reached the limit in all aspects. If he wanted to make further progress, he could only find another way. And he, who had been unable to find a way, seemed to have found something in this remote mountain village. This was also one of the main reasons why Xiao Chen was willing to stay. Of course, liking this place was also an indispensable reason. From time to time, laughter could be heard coming from outside the courtyard. There were children, men, and women. The people living here seemed to have no worries at all. Every day they had smiles on their faces. Seeing them seemed to make one feel better. Uncle Xiao Chen. Just as Xiao Chen was enjoying this peace, a dignified child rushed in. He was about 7 or 8 years old. This was the child of the village chief. His name was Hu. He had lived here for a few months, so Xiao Chen was already very familiar with him. Moreover, for some reason, this little guy seemed to like to stay with Xiao Chen. As long as he had time, he would come to Xiao Chen. Seeing Hu come in, Xiao Chen couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. "What's wrong?" did you get into trouble again? No, Grandpa asked me to bring you some wild vegetables. In this regard, the little guy said unhappily. At the same time, he waved the wild vegetables in his hand. Men would hunt, while women would pick some wild vegetables in their free time. Seeing this, Xiao Chen smiled and rubbed the little guy's head. Put it over there. He eagerly put it down, but he had no intention of leaving. Instead, he carried a small stool over to Xiao Chen and said with an expectant expression, Uncle Xiao Chen, tell me more about the outside world. The outside world? What's there to say? Just tell me. I like to hear it. It feels so exciting outside. Who was definitely the most curious about the outside world. He seemed to want to go out and see it. Admittedly, the colorful world in the land of all living beings was tens of thousands of times more exciting than here, but was it really like Who? Right now, Who could only see the bright side. He didn't know the dark side at all. Xiao Chen didn't doubt that if Who went to the land of all living beings now, he wouldn't be able to survive without someone to take care of him, because the hearts of people in the land of all living beings were far different from here. However, Xiao Chen couldn't resist Who's pestering. In the end, he opened his mouth and told Who a lot of things about the outside world. Hearing Xiao Chen's story, the light in Who's eyes grew brighter and brighter. In the end, he said with a look of longing, Uncle Xiao Chen, do you think I can go to the outside world in the future? It's so exciting there. Why go to the outside world? Isn't it good here? Okay, Dad, Mom, and Grandpa are here. Naturally, it's good. However, Who will go to the outside world first. Haha, even if you want to go, you have to wait until you're older. You can't go now. I'm not young. In a few years, my dad will be looking for a wife for me. A 7 or 8-year-old child looking for a wife. Xiao Chen smiled and shook his head. However, the children here did get married very early. Under normal circumstances, they would start preparing for marriage when they were 13 or 14 years old. This was especially true for girls. If they weren't married before the age of 15, they would be considered old. Under normal circumstances, people like who would go to the neighboring village to find a wife. Of course, when the girls here reached the age, they would basically marry off to other villages. Chapter 3076. How could he have imagined that one day he would be discussing marriage with a 7 or 8-year-old child? Xiao Chen smiled as he looked at who was speaking with a straight face. In fact, Xiao Chen liked who very much. Moreover, he wanted to go to the outside world so much. Xiao Chen had considered this problem. With the protection of the temple, even if whose cultivation talent was extremely ordinary, he could at least successfully step into the martial Dao. It would not be a big problem for him to cultivate to the Dao transformation realm or even the Emperor realm. Originally, Xiao Chen had thought about this, but later, he secretly checked whose body and found that he could not cultivate at all. Perhaps it was because of the birth of this world. The meridians in the bodies of the creatures born here were only mortal meridians, which could not accommodate the world energy at all. If even the world energy could not accommodate and comprehend, then even if Xiao Chen had countless methods and many treasures, it would be useless. It was like, if you did not have a cup, how could you get water? If you held it with your hands, it would leak out sooner or later. This world was gradually being perfected. Xiao Chen believed that in the future, whose descendants would definitely be able to evolve in essence. At that time, they would be able to comprehend the world energy and even figure out their own cultivation method. But now, as their ancestors, who and the others had no way to cultivate at all. In this case, Xiao Chen also dispelled the idea of taking who to the outside world. After all, with Era's lifespan as an ordinary person, he might have aged after just one trip. For ordinary people, the outside world was too far away and their lives were too short. At least in Xiao Chen's eyes, they were like fireflies that disappeared in a flash. After chatting with Hu for a while, Xiao Chen patted him on the head and said, "Go ahead. Go, time is running out. In a while, your father will come looking for you with that kind of stick." "Oh, then Uncle Xiao Chen, I'll go first." He ran out of the courtyard like a wisp of smoke. Xiao Chen smiled and shook his head. The people here were very happy, but also a little unfortunate. This was because their lives were too short. However, without knowing what was going on in the outside world, they were happy. Because in the eyes of these villagers, humans only had a few decades in their lives. If you told them that someone could live for hundreds or thousands of years, they probably wouldn't believe it. Slowly getting up, Xiao Chen also planned to cook by himself. After coming here, he had already completely integrated into the life of an ordinary person. 3 meals a day were definitely indispensable. If Shui Rou and the others were here, they would definitely like this place. He skillfully boiled the water in the pot and soon prepared a simple dinner. After pouring a cup of ordinary liquor, Xiao Chen sat alone in the courtyard and drank leisurely. At this moment, the ordinary wild boar meat in his mouth seemed to be better than those spiritual treasures of heaven and earth. Every bite made him feel extremely comfortable. However, as they were eating, Xiao Chen suddenly sensed a mysterious fluctuation coming from afar. With a slight frown, Xiao Chen's figure slowly disappeared from where he stood. Following the direction of the aura, Xiao Chen appeared on top of a tall mountain far away from the village. This was an active volcano. The surrounding temperature was so high that it could melt a person. But to Xiao Chen, this was nothing. He gazed at the interior of the volcano with a faint gaze. Something was being born inside. This aura, without hesitation, Xiao Chen stepped into the volcano. The scorching magma around Xiao Chen couldn't get close to him, let alone hurt Xiao Chen. Along the way to the bottom of the magma, Xiao Chen finally saw what he was looking for. And this sight left Xiao Chen's eyes glinting with excitement. Heaven and Earth's core. This Heaven and Earth's core was a legendary treasure. This was something he heard from Little Qing. According to Little Qing, Heaven and Earth were actually the same as living beings. A complete Heaven and Earth could not only give birth to Heaven and Earth spirits, but also give birth to a Heaven and Earth's core. The so-called Heaven and Earth's core wasn't the real Heaven and Earth's core. Instead, it was formed from the purest and most primitive energy of Heaven and Earth. It was somewhat similar to the origin power, but of a much higher level. The two weren't on the same level at all. In other words, the aura emanating from the Heaven and Earth's core was probably equivalent to the origin power. This went to show how much higher the Heaven and Earth's core was compared to the origin power. He didn't expect a treasure that he had never seen before to actually appear here. Little Qing said that this Heaven and Earth's core can only be encountered and not sought. It's a legendary existence, but no one has truly seen it, not even Little Qing. I didn't expect to actually encounter it. Suppressing his excitement, Xiao Chen said unhurriedly. If he could successfully refine this Heaven and Earth's core, it would definitely be beneficial to him. Sure enough, this world is my blessed land. Reaching out to touch the Heaven and Earth's core, Xiao Chen felt an indescribable feeling just by touching a wisp of aura emanating from it. How should he put it? It was strange. It was as though a string in his heart had been touched. He understood something, but it was still very vague. This was just a wisp of aura from the Heaven and Earth's core. Without hesitation, Xiao Chen left a divine consciousness clone in the village, without hesitation. As for his original body, he began to refine the Heaven and Earth's core. With this Heaven and Earth's core, Xiao Chen was confident that his strength could increase again. Sitting cross-legged, the Heaven and Earth's core seemed to be guided by something and was slowly pulled above Xiao Chen's head. A pure white light slowly enveloped Xiao Chen's entire body. Under the cover of the light, Xiao Chen felt extremely comfortable. his heart was also incomparably peaceful. At the same time, his cultivation, which had been stagnant, began to circulate on its own. It circled around his meridians and circulated continuously. Every time it circulated, his meridians seemed to become stronger. It wasn't the heaven and earth's spiritual energy. The power emanating from the heaven and earth's core was something that even Xiao Chen had never seen before. It was an unfamiliar and extremely mysterious power. It was as though it had transcended all other powers in the world. If Lin Yun, Mu Lingxian, Dongfang Yun, Mo He, Ancestor He and the others knew that Xiao Chen had actually found a heaven and earth's core by chance, they would probably be envious. They would probably be envious to death. This was simply something that could only be encountered and not sought after. Without great luck, it was impossible to find it. However, Xiao Chen had found such a peerless treasure so easily. With the help of the heaven and earth's core, Xiao Chen directly entered a meditative state and began to cultivate. Although it was very slow, it was already an extremely pleasant surprise for Xiao Chen. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3077. At Xiao Chen's level, it was extremely difficult to increase one's cultivation by even the slightest bit. With the help of the heart of the universe, Xiao Chen was slowly improving. The people in the village outside had no idea that Xiao Chen was here. That divine sense clone was exactly the same as Xiao Chen. The ordinary people in the village could not see any clues at all. Time passed slowly. The energy contained in the heart of the universe was enormous and extremely difficult to refine. It was Xiao Chen's first time coming into contact with the heart of the universe. However, even with his cultivation, it was extremely slow and difficult to refine the energy in the heart of the universe. In Xiao Chen's opinion, even if the ancient living beings obtained the heart of the universe, they would not be able to do anything but refine it bit by bit. It was very slow, but Xiao Chen was extremely excited. This was the true top treasure in the world. As long as he could refine the heart of the universe, Xiao Chen's strength would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Even his physique would probably undergo a transformation. He focused all his attention on refining the heart of the universe. At the same time, in the land of living beings, several months had passed. The prodigies who passed the preliminary test had also been cultivating in the divine temple for several months. Although they were puzzled as to why the final test had not begun, these prodigies were very excited. That was because the cultivation environment here was definitely the best they had ever seen. To be able to cultivate here was already a great opportunity for them. Even if the final test had not begun and they were allowed to cultivate here, these young prodigies would not have any complaints. Not to mention, ever since they passed the preliminary test and entered the divine temple, they were given a fixed amount of cultivation resources every day. This kind of treatment simply blinded everyone's eyes. One must know that the cultivation resources given by the divine temple were all ordinary trash. Take the elixirs for example. Almost every elixir was of the upper grade at the very least. There were even some supreme grade elixirs. These first-grade elixirs had very little poison in them and were extremely pure. Using them to cultivate would definitely yield twice the results with half the effort. From this, one could see how strong the divine temple's foundation was. Any bit of resources was enough to excite these young prodigies. While some people were cultivating diligently, there were naturally others who were curious or worried. They were afraid that they wouldn't be able to pass the test. But on this day, the dozen or so temple powerhouses in charge of the preliminary test appeared once more. The final test begins now. His voice reverberated throughout the small world. Hearing this, all the geniuses exited their cultivation and hurried out of their rooms. But you will lose the right to enter the sacred hall. The expert from the sacred hall finally spoke. Then, all the geniuses walked into the azure fire one by one. Being enveloped by the azure fire, intense pain spread throughout everyone's body. They even felt like they were going to be burned alive. But no one was willing to withdraw, because in the past few months, they had completely seen the experts of the sacred hall. They knew that if they could cultivate in the sacred hall, it would be a great help to them. Since they had already come this far, no one wanted to fail at the last moment. Even though the intense pain was unbearable, everyone gritted their teeth and persevered. To reach the peak of martial arts, willpower was essential. No matter how talented you were, it was impossible to have a smooth sailing life. Everyone understood this. Now that the opportunity to enter the sacred hall was right in front of them, no one wanted to give up. They wanted to seize this opportunity and soar to the top. Damn it, I won't lose. I must enter the sacred hall. I can't lose. The sacred hall, I won't be eliminated. The same thought emerged in the minds of countless people. They had entered the sage hall and had already come this far. How could they admit defeat just because of a little pain? It was impossible. Even if they had to give it their all, they had to persevere. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Entering the array formation was equivalent to entering a whole new world. The arrays could use various methods to tempt and mislead the participants according to their obsessions or thoughts. Once they could not hold on to their hearts and were lost in the arrays, it would be considered a failure. As long as they could withstand the test, hold on to their hearts, and break the arrays, it would be considered a success. It could be said that this test was much more difficult than the previous tests of willpower. They were not on the same level at all. For these young fellows, it was already extremely difficult to hold on to their hearts in such an illusion, let alone break the arrays. That was even more difficult. Moreover, these arrays were all personally refined by Li Tian. They were of a very high grade. It could be said that in the entire land of all living, there was no array that could surpass this grade. Although Li Tian was only a primordial being in the temple, he was definitely the number one person in the Tao of arrays. This was because none of the divine ancestors had studied arrays. Of course, at the level of Shao Chun and the others, arrays were actually not that useful anymore. Naturally, they would not spend a lot of effort studying them. Groups of 100 enter the arrays one after another. Begin now. The temperament test had officially begun. 100 geniuses entered the secret realm in turns. As soon as the powerhouse from the temple finished speaking, the first group of geniuses stepped into the arrays. The side branches took their seats, and the arrays were activated. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.